It's incredibly small. It's just not incredibly bright in any frequency. And you're getting way more of that type of radiation just from the sun. And we're not even talking about the ionized radiation, beta and gamma and so forth, that you'd absorb that causes skin cancer. So trust me, I mean, it's not any worse. And if you think that and it goes, well, what about the frequencies? I go, well, maybe you could concern yourself with the frequencies, but at the same time, this entire planet that we're standing in, the radio waves were here long before we were here. Every lightning bolt that goes off, every thunderstorm creates radio waves. And they're all over the planet, and they resonate inside this little cavity. So we've been exposed to them forever. So basically, I don't think, considering the brightness of the sun and other things that we have, that this particular light that's going off and on very quickly, that's 0.6 watts, is really going to affect anything about the human body, if you look at it that way. And that helped, I think. Just because I don't want people to fear technology that all they're really wanting to do is put things faster. It's good to examine it, but these frequencies are well known to not harm humans. They're not like microwaves or something.
Well, you see, Neil, what they're finding is, so let's say develop things like this AI and that, which really goes into then industrial processes eventually, where you mechanise things to the next degree, say like self-driving vehicles type thing. Well, what they found is even 5G and that. 5G and that is too. It's not. I suppose you could say fast enough. So they will keep looking at developing up the scale, and it's a bit like when we started off, say, with radios and where we are now. With radios and that, it's just a progressive development throughout time. And what you're saying is, yeah, I understand what you're saying, they're not harmful, but I suppose it's like anything. If you're exposed to huge amounts of it, possibly it could then have harmful effects.
Oh my God, yes.
So, but in a normal environment,
you wouldn't. Correct. Like an example is almost every power plant actually has this situation. When you're in certain parts of the power plant, all of the frequencies and if you could see it, it'd be very, very bright in there. But you can't see it because the frequencies are beyond your sight. But you still can't stay in that room for any more than 20 minutes at a time, because it will start heating you up, because all the radio waves, you're absorbing them like your water. Even though they're not the right frequency, they're not like made to excite water. They will excite you, and obviously there's parts of your body that would begin to, boil or stuff if you stayed in there. But those are. I also said the same thing. Like I remember in Britain when they first developed very strong radio waves, they didn't put them high enough. And you're dealing 100,000 or 50,000 watts. And I said, well, yeah, think about a radio station from your favorite radio station. It's 100,000 watts, and it's just downtown. So to your body, it's a giant thing, a light bulb, a 100,000 watt light bulb that is broadcasting music, but your body picks that up, and when it hits you, it turns into heat. But it's very far away. So it shouldn't really affect you. But one of the things it did affect was, for example, ionizing like when they did in Britain, in London. Like I said, it wasn't... they were just starting to go to larger and larger strengths. And one of the problems is that all the metal in the cafeteria would send out electric sparks. Anything not grounded. So they had a whole new problem that they developed, and that had to be solved. But that's nothing compared to 0.6 watts, from a cell phone. Immersing yourself in these frequencies, yeah, I wouldn't recommend that for anyone. Because
I sent you, Neil, a couple of things that this Professor Simon Holland, he's actually a filmmaker by trade, right? On the UK EMP weapon that they developed in the 50s, and what they probably missed, the Doomsday weapon. I don't know whether you got to see it or not.
Where did you send it?
A couple of weeks ago. I sent it to Discord.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but anyway, basically, what it came out in the end, it's quite interesting, because what came out in the end was they developed, this system so that it they could knock out Russia. But what they found was they couldn't use it because along the way it would knock out everything between it and Russia. So it became, you know, like non-usable.
Actually, that's not beyond the realm of, directed energy attacks. If you wanted to disable, say, a base from communicating or a radar station, you could basically, inconceivably, alter where this frequency is going, bounce it off the atmosphere until it hits exactly, right there on that part of the planet. And you're right, anything in the way of the path of the thing as it bounces would obviously be problematic to anything in the way, like a plane. But also, there would be it would spread out. Well, as we know, frequencies, different frequencies don't bounce the same. They have a different angle, like prisms, when they refract. So you're going to have some of that type of thing, plus the water's not flat.
It's the same with HARP. HARP was actually developed.
That's kind of what I was thinking about, actually.
A continuous radio system, because apparently the radio signals bounce off with heat in the ionosphere, and so of the night time they cool, and those signals then aren't as good. And so part of the development of those HARP-like systems was to heat the ionosphere so that they had a more 24-hour system to watch back when it was all developed, to watch what the Soviets were doing. So it was interesting because this was developed in the 1950s. All this was developed way back then, and so where it's gone from there, who would know? Because there are a lot more. They seem to be able to hide a lot more things now. I don't think society is as open now as it was maybe back then even.
Well, the technology of basically sending radio waves directed at particular targets to disrupt their electrical activities is not new. You can do that at home.
No.
You just need a microwave oven, really, and a way to direct it. And you could point that thing and and basically add some more frequencies to it and direct it at whatever you want. And it will have to process what it's getting hit by. That's one of the situations with spacecraft. You have to process the heat, but everything that hits you also, especially solar radiation and other things like that, are bouncing or are basically turning this little thing into a minor microwave oven. So you got to dissipate that as well. So you can and believe it or not, one of the easiest things to do is to, if you were smart, and I assume that these people are, would be to run the whole shell of the spacecraft into a capacitor or capacitors to absorb this increase in voltage and basically turn this radio into a thing that feeds into the batteries. Now it's not to power the batteries. It would give a little bit of power, but the point is that it would basically nullify the effects of the vibrations and the frequencies that are running along the currents of the shell of your spacecraft, which is made of metal. This is just reasonable thinking, and I'm not a space engineer or anything. So just working on those type of things, this is where where they're at, and and this has been, just combining those two effects, just the situation with the cutlery all glowing and having sparks flying over it. It's just the same as sticking a fork in a microwave, right? So
now that makes me think of something. You must have a cold, huh? I'm just getting over.
I'm sorry. Yes.
It's okay. It's all right. It's okay. I'm just glad you're doing okay. So it brings to mind when they do this. What do you call it? The TR3B, the electrogravitics, where they're doing that. You made a comment one time when we talked about it and said, how would you even start something like that? It would need something to start it. But once it got going, wouldn't it protect the inhabitants, in their own sort of gravity bubble?
Well, the trouble is that we know actually no link between gravity, besides some spinning objects, yes, that show a reduced gravity or attraction to them, and the other spinning object that seems to have that kind of effect is, as we talked before, a tornado.
Yeah.
So those two effects are basically changing in my opinion, this goes along with what Wal Thornhill is trying to say regarding electricity, or like regarding gravity. Gravity is not the result of, and I'm using air quotes here, the bending of space and time.
Right.
Then it must be something else. And the only other thing that, well, not the only other thing, let's be open here, but one of the reasonable things to think is that the reason that gravity is so weak is because it's an electrical force, which is incredibly strong, as we know. We use it for engines and motors and everything else. But a gravity force, like just imagine we have a gravity-based engine. So using the weakest force in the entire universe
Right.
to power something, that seems ridiculous, right?
Exactly.
So the other way of looking at it then is that let's say that these, that Wal Thornhill is correct, and that each atom is distorted slightly based on the positive charge inside of the atom, which is pulled towards a negative surface. So this negative surface is, of course, the ground of the Earth, and it's pulled towards other material. Just like, but it's only affecting, the reason it can't be shielded is because these charges are not moving the way that charges move in what we consider conventional electricity. Conventional electricity rides on top of the electrons. And they are basically where if I was to say the Higgs boson field, okay, which I don't even know exists, but let's call that the ether for now, and that every positive charge creates a dent, then up pops a negative charge in between two positive charges, and that's why everything's equal. So basically, the reason that electrons are so light is because they are just a reflection or that type of thing of a proton being there or something positively charged. So this creates atoms and so forth and all the wonderful stuff that comes with that. But if that is the case then, and these atoms have mass, spinning them at high velocities should create a situation where the alignment of the atoms is no longer down. They're spinning so fast that they're going outward slightly. And this degree, if you calculate it in, and I'm trying to be actual scientific here, but if you calculate that in complex numbers and realize it has an angle to it, so if you could spin it so fast that it could counter gravity, it can't. It can only spin it so fast that it would equal gravity. And even then it couldn't, because gravity is slightly pulling it down. You can make things lighter. That's nice. So you could make a vehicle lighter in principle with this, but you'd have to add the mass itself to spin it up to do that. So it would be counterintuitive anyway. Like you're basically saying, unless you could say, I'm going to spin up a sizable amount of this craft. But if you were to put it into, say, a conventional helicopter or a conventional airplane, it would be pointless because you're making it lighter, sure, but you're only making it lighter of the weight you added. You're not you yourself sabotaging the plane to prove this point. Sure, it'd be easier to hook the whole thing up to a balloon that can't lift up, can barely lift off the spinning disc, and then spin that disc up and watch to see if it flies. There you go. You'd have, if you can show that as an equal system in a controlled environment, and then just spin it up and watch it float up because of the spinning top going so fast. I mean, it would have to go faster. It had to be enough to push the thing out past, like if you imagine the pole being straight down towards the core of the Earth, or to a part inside the Earth which is sufficiently down to say core, then this pulling, you would create an angle as you spun it, and this would get wider. But you know that even if you spun it a little bit, well, we don't know how fast you'd have to spin it to counter this, and you wouldn't really counter it at all because there would still be a complex number based on the 9.8 meters per second of gravity, or cubed. And this would be always pulling down depending on how fast you're spinning it sideways. You would have to spin it. I mean, to make that number negligible, if you know what I mean, you'd have to spin it incredibly fast. And so even spinning it like maybe a couple hundred miles an hour might not be enough to really change the weight that much, because it's still down near the 90%, down near the bottom of this graph, I guess is what I'm saying, that I'm envisioning in my mind. I'm holding two hands down and then imagining it spinning, and then they get wider and wider and wider, and at full spin, they still couldn't get to zero, like directly, pointing outwards. The direction of the force would still be always down. Yeah. So then how do you how do you make something anti-gravity? Well, first thing you'd have to recognize, it would be easier to change the angle of the charges, like to make the charges somehow reflect and make you repel from the ground.
Well, you know, I really do believe that exists. And I think if you watch...
Well, it's impossible.
The moon landings, you know, they always say, why didn't the LEM leave a crater? They were using electrogravitics. If you watch it take off, you don't see no rocket.
I could tell you why that happens. I could tell you exactly why that happens. And it
looks like an electrical reaction.
It does. It does. In a way, you're not wrong, because it's only being pelted with high-speed ions coming from this jet. But remember, if you've ever seen a spacecraft as it keeps going up and up and up and up and up, you'll notice that the flames start getting wider and wider and wider and wider. Because
it almost overcomes it.
Right, because what's happening is that it's spreading out and it's charged. Right, because it's mostly spent fuel that has already had most of its electrons stripped off it, and you're just ejecting it out the back. So this thrust is now in atmosphere. It's compressed and makes smoke, but then it gets wider and wider and wider because it's outside the atmosphere. There's no smoke to make anymore because there's no oxygen being burned. So this becomes a weird-looking, beautiful. Sometimes they see spirals. They say, if you're looking over north, and they say, "I'll see the spiral. That has to be an alien." No, that's them dropping a actual booster, and the booster spins as it goes down and crashes into the ground.
Oh yeah,
that's what they're doing. So that's why it looks so weird, and it's in space, so you don't even understand what you're looking at. Right. So on the moon, like even when they were faking it, and I mean faking it for film, right up to like Capricorn 1, where they, believe it or not, and this is kind of funny, the movie revolves around faking a Mars landing in the 1960s or something. Anyway, but even then they did it all wrong. Like even right up until we launched the things, we didn't understand what was going to happen. But the thrust is correct because they did their math. What they didn't understand is that the thrust is going to go in every direction as soon as it leaves that booster, because there's no pressure on the moon. Right. So then the reason you don't see a lot of smoke is because it's not the thrust hitting air, pushing the sand and making a giant plume, which we saw when it took off from Earth. There's nothing there. So the only things that get hit are those little stripes that just get hit by the actual gas itself that made it to the ground and actually pushed those sand particles away. So it's very diffuse. Still give the same thrust because, space, mass, throwing mass away equals this much thrust. That's what they were doing, obviously. But it looked completely different than I think they even expected, just because of that reason. Now, I'm not saying they don't have electrogravitics now, because if they are, let's just say JPL and people like that, they're not idiots. And I'm assuming that I'm not an idiot. And let's say I'm just generally on the right path, but I don't know everything. I'm not a CIA agent, or I don't have I don't even know the stuff that, Donald Scott knows. I can understand it and I would learn from him, but I fear I would be learning from him for the rest of my life. He's quite knowledgeable on, plasma vortexes and of course the fields that they generate. I can explain them as a layman, but, I'm not an educated layman. I can explain it to a layman via him, so that's good. But when you see the technology that, if they don't believe what they're selling, now that's a big if the regular scientific community is off in, we'll call it, for lack of a better term, la la land, okay, then and they're playing with quantum theory, just like when Dirac said in 2016. So this guy is really old by this time, because this theory came out in 1947. He said that thing was only supposed to last 10 years. Okay, we were expecting a better theory to come up with it, and now we turned it into a numbers game, and we're not even sure that the numbers really relate to anything. We're really at that point where it's quite clear to anyone with a brain that quantum theory is completely unstable. And if you go down that far and you realize it's completely unstable and untenable mathematically, that's what I should have said. The same thing with cosmology. They run into a problem with just taking into consideration the orbits or the rotation velocity of a galaxy. When you see the rotational curve, it fits electrically across a home polar motor, but it doesn't fit with gravity, which
Because
is
the outside spins just as fast as the inside.
Yeah, like a disk. Yes. Yeah, exactly. It becomes there's rotational velocity increase.
They had to
closer
make
the
up
core.
dark matter to explain that.
Yes, exactly. Yes, but that is what I mean by untenable. And thank God, as I told people to wait. Okay, these guys would like to steal whatever discoveries they have from the electric universe.
Oh, of course. Yes.
And it's natural human reaction. The good thing is that all of us have been recording this stuff for years, and there's been lots of conferences which have been recorded.
Right.
So at the end of the day, I might be long dead, but the things that I thought of that were mine will probably be researched by someone going through these great masses of, I don't know, we'll call it, I found the database of YouTube before the crash. Yes. You know, and then they're going to go through it and they're going to like find little piece of history, just like they will. And then they're going to realize that the stuff that we've been basing it on from these doctors, you can see the controversy in real time where these guys were saying, no, they stole our ideas. You know, and there could be any number of ideas that were popped out. It could be my idea. For example, and this is not, I don't think it's been directly expressed, but when I said that there could be that the reason that gravity makes things appear to be gas giants or made of hydrogen or whatever, that's the apparent mass. Well, something involving the apparent mass or the mass of a planet must be not just how much of the material is there, but it also should relate to an inverse of the charge of the body somehow. I don't know exactly if it's a logarithmic scale. Is it, is it linear? I don't know anything like that. But to look at it, it's clear that the highest charged bodies are the lightest, and that can't be a coincidence.
Right. You know, doesn't it drive you crazy when you're watching a show and they're dancing all around the electric universe and don't know it? You just want to grab them through the screen.
Oh yes.
And say, hey.
I always try to leave something positive in the comments of those ones that will direct people to it without directly saying electric universe.
Yeah.
Like that will give anyone who's interested something to search. Like one time I'll say, like maybe it's about comets, and I'll say, well, like if the silica coming off leaves an O positive and it gets picked up by the H negative coming from the solar wind, which we can assume is an electric current or is electric current sheet. If that's the case, then we're just getting HO from the rock and there's actually no liquid there at all. So it's not snow. Could this be just a plasma discharge in a vacuum? Question mark. And that's it. I'll because I don't want to get deleted. Yeah. And I want people to...
Right.
And then anyone who's paying attention will go, I never thought of that before. And that's what I want to get. I want them to come with their own minds to it.
Yes.
You know, I don't want to prove anything. I just want to show you that what we have is wrong. And there's much better ways of looking at this. And that's, by the way, going back to the shape of the dipoles of this, electric gravity that Wal Thornhill talks about. I don't know if he ever mentioned it. Because I honestly don't know, but I think we've talked about it. But one of the things that comes up to me is that, well, if the charge is higher than the charge of the electrons being higher compared to the protons, then the higher charge of the body would make the quote-unquote orbits change. And it would seem to have a less impact of the material it's pulled towards, therefore making it appear like it has less mass. So there is a reason to think that. Like it makes, even though I have not the ability to prove this, but with just, and of course everyone can say, well, you could be fooling yourself too. It's true. But there seems to be some logical confluence of the idea of charge changing the electron shells and making these protons in the middle appear to be less attracted to the planet. Therefore, gravity is less if the charge is higher. That type of thing.
Now, trying to understand gravity, we have the sun in the middle of the solar system, right, and all the planets are dispersed into certain locations dictated, I would say, by the the positive charge of the sun, because they're little negative bodies that are rotating around, right?
Correct. The
so
sun
what keeps them from being attracted right in?
Well, they have mass. Yeah. That's a real thing. I mean, it's not like Like, I'm not saying gravity doesn't exist or inertia doesn't exist. I mean, my God, our whole universe would fall apart. But with that, though, it is equally reasonable to assume that these are, as Hans Alfvén put it, Dr. Hans Alfvén said, they are like the ashes of prior electrical events. Right. So the sun, if we were talking about it being invaded by Saturn coming in on an angle, that would be the largest frigging comet thing we've ever seen beside the sun. And that coming in close to us, I mean, I think it was the Aleutian hand axe. I think it eventually became, and when it came back later, it was the Venus figurine. This was a conglomeration of another solar system entering into ours. That's like not just one planet, but several. And it together, see, because it's being held together electrically, because they can get close, but not too close. You know what I mean? They have shells around them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, with all that put together, you could understand that technically that's impossible for a gravitational body to do that, because they would fly apart as they are all pulled. But this mass, although changing shape over time and losing charge, and apparently as it went through, as we can see the Venus figurines change over time and get longer necks and look more like lizards and all this other crap.
Yeah, everything does.
Well, yeah, but that was a long period of time. It seems that like ancestors have been worshiping this thing when it came by every time it did, and it didn't technically really hit us like it was supposed to do, like an extermination event type of thing, and it didn't this time because it was off course or whatever, lost charge. Either way, it did, however, seem to grab a hold of us, and we were with it. When we were within it, that would be when our gravity would be different because of the charge of Saturn being, we were within that. Yeah. We became immersed in its field, and therefore our field was completely changed, and we could build giant things, and there were large creatures moving around. And I'm not talking about way dinosaur age, assuming, of course, that dinosaurs did exist a long period of time, but we can explain that they actually must have been longer away than the megafauna that we've experienced recently. We know that there is a difference there just in the composition of these two things. So this had to have been like a prior era of existence, but mankind could, a few of these things could have lived, but I don't necessarily buy that, of course, but I can see it.
Well, I always wondered what happens to the electricity after it runs through the appliance. Is that the ashes? Is that what you're talking about?
Actually, it's very simple. There are two things that happen to electricity when it goes through something. Obviously, it will change all the parameters, voltage, current. The resistance of that object is turned into heat. So if we imagine that the Earth is an inefficient transformer, then it's generating heat. Okay? And it's generating movement on its surface. We call that wind. It's pulling this stuff around.
And the wind is a current, too.
Well, high enough up. Because the moisture of our planet really kind of feeds cyclones, but doesn't seem to feed anyway, tornadoes. So there's a difference there. And yes, you could say that cyclones are depressions in our electric field and so forth. So you can have some debate on that, but it seems like as soon as you can touch a top layer that's dry, that dry layer can contain charges and discharge the Earth in the form of a tornado. And of course, the reason it spins the way it does is because of the right-hand rule. You have current positive going down the middle, you have negatives around the bottom, and it has to go to the right, so it starts spinning. And this might also explain why things like transport trucks get stuck to the side of them for like several rotations before they're remotely thrown off. And the angle of inertia of that object, I mean, an 80,000 pound truck going around in a circle 4 times and turning quite a steep turn as it goes, it seems exceptionally powerful winds would have to be pushing, more powerful than the ones that are pushing it forward. I'm not sure I buy that, considering it seems like a lot of things stick to the side of these things. And that could explains the situation where people explain things got weird when the tornado hit, like everything started floating. Yeah.
Well, a tornado is kind of like a mini Birkeland current, isn't it?
Oh, it is a full Birkeland current.
Yeah.
Except it's not 2 twisting ones coming down. It's actually the core being the main path of discharge with shells around it, yes. Mm-hmm. Usually only one because it's thick in the atmosphere. But if you went to space or further up, you could see it would form layers and shells just like you see from rockets. Mm-hmm. Because the material begins to sort itself electrically into plasma. Plasma sorts itself into cells, and that's something that we didn't like. They don't want to even admit in the Victorian age because it's just too complex. But once that's why we named it like plasma. Langmuir said, well, it's like blood plasma. It forms itself into cells.
Oh,
it's the same thing here.
Yeah. Have you heard of the plasma life theory?
It sounds like something I would have made.
It's alive. They're theorizing that it's alive.
Well, that's like theorizing fire is alive. So, however,
plasma life theory, I think it's called.
I think there's certain situations that would indicate that plasma itself has characteristics of life, and the idea that it can make life and transport life through space is something that I could totally believe in. I mean, when they call Mars the bringer of pestilence, or they talk about, for example,
blood-stained stormer of walls.
Yeah, what was also the one with Venus? When Venus came around, it was just as bad. Like you had viruses and stuff coming down. So the idea that microbes exist on other planets in their atmospheres, especially one as electrically active as Venus, would be reasonable. So now I'm not, obviously, just by the way they acted and what they said about it. Like, yeah, it brings pestilence. It sucks. Yeah, it blows chunks off the planet. We don't like it. We hid in caves. That's what tells me that, and as we talked before, the fact that they had enough time to build the caves, in some of those cases, indicates to me that this was an ongoing problem that happened every few years, or at least enough time to build caves. Like you build a bunch, like you're basically, it's like the Long Night from Game of Thrones or something. It's like every few years, this planet gets hit by this Kali Venus thing and smokes a bunch of parts of it and creates a bunch of disease. So we tend to hide here in these caves. And you can see where some of these caves, especially when you see them, they look like they're not doorways, but it looks like they've been worn off, and then you can see inside of the structure. Well, I was wondering if that was something like when the Israelites talked about the mountains melting like wax. Was it were these places actually getting hit and getting eroded right there in front of them? Could you imagine you're eating dinner and the wall starts disappearing? And you're like, holy crap, we got to go further in because it's eating the mountain. That feels like some of these places look really melty like that. But when you combine that with some of the amazing pieces of technology, like mirrored walls inside of caverns and stuff like that, you're like, how'd they pull this off? It's beautiful. And it makes me wonder if, in addition to changes to not only life and gravity, could it also have had changes to materials? Not unlike, like when we heat something up, it becomes more valuable. What happens when everything's charged up? Does steel cut better? Do metals cut better? Is rock weaker? Like, I don't know for sure, of course.
I would think something might get weaker if you freeze it really cold.
Oh, no, that will crack it. You're right. Yeah. No, you're totally right there. But what I was thinking of, like, for example, imagine that the Earth is really highly charged and you're trying to do some carving and you realize that basaltic rock. So this is the basalt and the other types of rock there. What was it called? Anyway, other types of rock that are very hard, but they tend to have particles in them that are, for lack of a better term, electric crystals and so forth.
Yes, crystals.
Well, yeah, but also embedded in the rock itself because of the way it was made. Well, what if you happen to, this is long ago, you happen to have, these rocks are different and the metal's different, and the tool you're using is wired up to something. And you just ground it. And now the knife cuts a lot better through the rock because of the fact that it's removing, it's taking ions along with it. There's an electrical process involved, but they don't really understand it. They just use it. And not unlike wondering if some of those, we talked about the scoop marks. Like I could envision things like a machine that has just a sparker on the end and just like goes, okay, moving over, and it's just ripping up everything in a radius.
Jeez.
I don't believe that's extraordinary and will require extraordinary evidence. But there's very few explanations for things like that. But it would also explain why they're slightly polished. Like when you go in and you'd have to go underneath, you take the little thing up and go, and would remove everything in that area, and everything looks like it's polished. Well, it would make sense that you're not just hitting the knobs down. I mean, they would hit the knobs down, and that it left, but you would just move it over, take out another basketball-sized chunk, and then move it over, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, again, I've heard a lot of people talk a lot of things, but one of the things that they're stuck with when thinking about this in the conventional way is just they don't have the idea of, well, I'm willing to look at, obviously, cement ideas, but in addition, not cement, but limestone powder and some conglomerates being turned into, like why these things have such good fit towards each other makes a lot more sense if they were just piled on top of each other and like cement.
You know, I thought that too, and there is that someone, I think it was you, told me that they rediscovered Roman concrete.
Yeah, it just happened. I didn't make that up. It happened like last week.
Yeah,
I mean, that's when the announcement happened, and yeah. I'm a big fan.
Well, that would make sense. Yeah.
It'd be nice to have we could build things like build a road and a bridge and have it, instead of going, well, this will last 50 years, you go, like, this will last 500 years.
Yeah.
That would be nice. That would really help.
Well, there are parts of the Appian Way still around, isn't there?
There's lots of parts of a lot of things still around, but yeah. I think some of the things that I found interesting is like how much these people knew how to, like, some of these stones that I see in some of these forts were clearly on top of other forts and everything else, and the stones are huge, and I'm like I can believe certain things, but just like we were talking about the cart tracks, is there something else going on?
Yeah.
You know, is it just that, or is it like materials did have a change? Because we can't experiment with that. That's the one thing that we can't experiment with. You can heat something up and then experiment it, like glass, and you can do glass flow, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take what happens to glass when we put it in a highly charged environment and it's highly charged. Well, the trouble is that you can't go around playing games with it, because it will shock whatever you do, and the people will die. So you'd have to sort of build an insulated room that could be raised in voltage, that wouldn't attract things like lightning bolts. And the moment that you fucked up even once, everyone inside's dead. It's way worse than change in pressure. Like, change in pressure is one of the most dangerous things that you could ever have.
Yeah. And
the other one is change in voltage. And both are almost instant killers. Like, a change in heat, that takes time. You see what I mean? Like, you have a change in heat, this thing's heating you up. It takes a while before it heats up so much. And so therefore, and it's localized so that you can basically insulate against it. You know, the material that's shield against heat.
Isn't it voltage hertz, but amps kill?
Oh, yes. That's absolutely true. Yes. Amps do kill. That's why, and for reasons I think we can probably understand just by talking about lightning's hitting things, lightning kills lots of big animals a lot quicker than it kills us.
Yeah. It's
almost impossible to kill us if we can, like, not make it go through our torso.
Yeah. Right.
But the moment you create a loop, that's what animals do. They create a big loop. Because let's say a lightning bolt hits 20 feet in front of them. Okay, didn't hit them. Well, the electricity creates a pulse that goes up and goes out at the speed of light. Mm-hmm. And as it goes out, it hits the first legs of the animal and starts going up. Well, it won't start going up through the animal until the back legs are going, and then the back legs are hit. Well, here's the problem. The back legs are now at a different voltage than the front legs, because it's a degrading charge.
Yeah.
away from the strike point.
Right.
So let's say the voltage was like 1,000,000 volts got hit to the ground. It gets dissipated quickly through the rock and across the surface. But during that time, at the distance this animal is, the difference in voltage between their front feet and their back feet, if they were facing it, let's say, could be as much as 100,000 volts. So now the current difference between it says, oh, well, I find it easier to pass through this animal than I find it to go through the earth. So now current loops through the animal's body and it dies. And that's why you can see lightning hit and a whole whack of elk get killed.
Yeah, like a couple hundred at a time.
Yeah, that's just from a normal lightning strike. Imagine it was a massive one that was just rolling across the plains from some giant rock flying by.
Yep.
I mean, anything, okay, woolly mammoths would go, why is my hair standing on end? Dead. All of them. Just dead. And they loved water. They were hanging around in swamps. What a worse place to be.
Yeah.
You know, it comes by, it goes, well, I like wet things. And wet fur? Oh, that's just great. Zorch.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, to the electricity.
Yeah. You know, I find it amazing that it took all the way until Manuel Velikovsky and David Talbot to put together the Saturn theory thing. I mean, what a great mental leap that was. You know, and I mean, even people, they talk about things that Velikovsky was talking about in the 40s and 50s. I mean, today, currently. Like the whole thing with Mars, and, you know, it's two moons, Phobos and Deimos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, the ancients called them the steeds of Mars, and Jonathan Swiss...
Or the dogs of war.
Yes. The guy who wrote Gulliver's Travels, Velikovsky says, must have had access to ancient texts because he properly names both moons and their orbits and sizes. You know, how 100 years before it was discovered. So why can't people get that in their head that the planets were closer? It's like a no-brainer to me. And the axial tilt.
It's actually, we talked about before, and it's really simple. It's so simple, it hurts. Hero worship.
Yeah.
That's all it is. We love Sir Isaac Newton. Sir Isaac Newton can't be wrong. He had a universal law of gravitation, according to these people, and we are humans. We tacked on universe. We didn't test it through the universe, but we tacked that on. And because of that, and because of his status as the preeminent calculus-making intelligent virgin, or whoever he was, I don't even know. The point is that this man managed to revolutionize and just begin science, you know, in earnest, physics, the whole idea. And all that put together makes him infallible to certain people. And because he's infallible, much like Einstein,
there's so many.
They can't be wrong. And I explained the other day, one thing I am sure of, that if Einstein was alive today, his opinions would be significantly different than those that he had in 1955.
Right. Yeah. That's why Velikovsky was all over him about worlds in collision. He almost got there, but the guy died.
Yeah.
Talk about bad luck.
Well, because remember, to Einstein, even if he didn't believe him, he saw that one of his flaws, and he agreed with this flaw, that his universe does not take into account electrodynamics, electromagnetism.
Yeah, right. They were written in the horse and buggy era, as Wal likes to call it. Yeah, I know. That's crazy. Just the fact the things he wrote about Mars should make someone sit up and take notice. But they just ignore the whole thing, and it's groundbreaking. It's revolutionary.
Well, yeah, and it also points out that we're asking the wrong questions. That's what I love about science.
Right.
And, like, at the end, I have a little bit of, if I could say I have faith in one thing, it's faith that the truth points to itself, that the truth of a situation will be revealed because all evidence will point towards it. Mm-hmm. Which is why I found, like, stumbling across the electric universe from my point of view, coming from perhaps maybe a not to pimp out anything he's written, because I don't necessarily believe I know where he gets his ideas, Graham Hancock. Yes, but he showed me that I should be looking bigger, that there's more to this whole thing about archaeology, and that's sort of where I stepped into this. And then I stumbled across, I think, saturncosmology.org by John Cook, and that, of course, him being an electrical engineer, me being electrically educated, at first, and then of course I went back and read it after I became an electrical engineer, and yeah, he's 100% right in a lot of things. But Wal and him, you would argue about whether or not this happened first or that happened first, or did Saturn come back only recently? Has it been there the whole time? Has it come and has it gone? All of these things are, to me, acceptable questions. I'm not necessarily convinced of either. I lean towards John Cook's a little bit more, not because Wal obviously has other theories that he could simply stand on by himself. I mean, and even in passing, I mean, the man, his electric gravity, and whether or not he totally agreed with John on certain things, but either way, John's look is revealing, and you have to see that there is a history, and he tries to put together the history of mankind, and basically it's a history of mythology in a way, which is basically what Velikovsky was trying to do. And of course, when you're talking about Dave Talbot and when he came into it and did the Saturn myth, and it's obviously not just him, because he was working with Velikovsky. You could see it was more than just that. It was more than just the one thing. Especially when then you start noticing it everywhere, all the symbols. Yeah. And then suddenly, just like you walk by something and you don't even think about it in any way weird. Like you think about that old movie Shaka Zulu or whatever it was called, and these people had put knives in their chest and they were standing facing the sun, and they had to stay there until they ripped them out.
Oh my God.
Okay. But that's what we did. Like he's imitating the two arms of the sun reaching into the two poles of the planet. And the sun is looking at us. So this had to be after like a certain period of time. This is when the Clash of the Titans had already occurred, but the sun was still giving, like, our polar eminence and its polar eminence were still so strong that we could see them, and they looked like they were reaching out to us. And so he was attaching himself to the pole of the sun to prove that his manhood. And then I saw another person, and I immediately, when I saw him having he had extra dots over one of his breasts, and he was wearing a lion's, a leopard's print. And immediately this was a historical piece, so it wasn't like, like a modern thing. And when I looked at that, I said, that's Mars. And it was like, what? Like, and you're like looking and go, well, his nipple is Olympus Mons. The two other things are the other ones on the Tharsis Bulge. And that one over there is that other mountain, which I can't remember. And then there's a scar across his chest, okay, which he drew there. So he didn't actually scar himself there, but he drew it there in red. And then it had the lower part of Mars is all pockmarked with craters. And so he put leopard print on. That's a guy dressing as a Mars warrior. And you wouldn't be able to see that unless you could see Mars, and unless these people invented the friggin' telescope.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't deny that. That right there, like you said, those type of things, they people think that you're fitting them in there, and I'm like, I didn't even try, man.
No.
It just comes to you after a while, over and over again. Like it's like we were talking the other day. It's like, why is there a flower on top of the bedposts with two wings on either side of it? Because that's Saturn.
Yeah.
Why do bedposts have balls on them? Because it's Saturn. Why?
Right?
Yeah. Why do you think the doors had every doorway is one of the two pillars that go up the pole on either side of the thing you were holding? Sometimes they are called spears, sometimes they're scepters and whatevers, but they're one in each hand, and they're on either doorway, and on either altar there's two candles, right in front of the big glory thing in the middle, which usually is something on top of the door. You would think it's a flower with sun rays on it, but if you look at any of the old things, even from Victorian era, they're clearly, that's Saturn on top of the door. Like,
I didn't know that. That's something new.
well, you'll see it
I
on
knew
top
the
of
Christmas tree was, but
Oh yeah, the banks and everything. Just we see if I'll find some. Like, see if I can see old doorways. I bet you there's like
it's amazing
doorways.
how many companies put the Saturn symbol in their signs. It's crazy.
Oh well, just for that, yes. But they know something. It's kind of creepy, but.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to. They're being nefarious. They're just going, "Hey, we know a secret you don't. Shush, shush."
Yeah, right.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not thinking that they are hiding it from mankind. They don't know the truth. They know the symbols. They don't know what we know more about the truth than they do.
Like the cube.
Yes, exactly. Let me share my screen here.
Sure. Go ahead.
I just typed in old doorways.
No, I'm sorry, Rick couldn't make it. You know,
That's okay.
I invited him. I don't know. He just didn't show up. Go on. Next time.
Did I share it? Is it there?
Yes, I see it.
Okay. And I didn't do anything. I just typed in old doorways and look at them. The first ones that come up, there's Saturn right there.
Yeah.
There's Saturn right there.
Wow.
There's Saturn right there.
I never knew
There's
that.
Saturn right there.
Mm-hmm.
There's literally the window, but of course the window would be lit. Here's the rainbows on top of the things, which are the things you would see all the colors. Mm-hmm. And if you go for, let's see, if we just go to, I don't want to antique doors for sale, but let's go to images to straight, and then, okay. This is, of course, the pillar. That's the combination of the pillar leading up, but that's just a type of door style.
So that's mimicking what the
look at that.
Saturn itself, or the polar alignment.
Well, look at this one.
Yeah.
And the two pillars, even that they're ingrained into the door, they're not even supporting anything, because this whole thing represents Saturn. Every doorway back then represented Saturn.
I did not know that.
Well, just look at it. It's this, it has that. I mean, this is might as well be called God, Mary, and Venus, or Mary and not Mary, Adam and Eve.
Because for another period of time, we seem to have Jupiter. Was that like the midnight sun or the sun?
No. The midnight sun is Saturn, but it's because it went out, and it was the original sun. Jupiter or Thor wasn't a sun, but he overthrew Kronos, like and they both went off in the sky, as we talked before. Jupiter was the giant winged one, okay, with the acorn and the handbag.
The actual the image that they show for Nibiru was basically Jupiter.
Right, and it's traveling out with these other planets connected to it. Some of them are farther away than it is, but we're seeing it. Remember, we can't see any more than to one side or to the other away from the sun. Like, we're not The way that it works is we basically, if it goes out far enough, it no longer becomes three objects. These three objects are entangled together, probably four even, and they're entangled and going off, battling each other into the sky, into the underworld. Okay, and that's what they were doing. But that battle, before that happened, I mean, Jupiter basically went up and said, "Hey, bitches," and they did the whole. I guess the closest thing to be describing to it as a depiction or an art form would be, I talked about this last night or the night before, was sumo wrestling. Two giant balls are trying to push each other away from the pole in the middle of the sky, which is the North Pole, and it's surrounded by a circle, and that circle is the horizon. And these two balls of men have legs, and they have to stand wide. The way that they have to stand is a certain way, just like, because that's the prominence is coming off the bottom of both of these planets. Like, they were so bright, the aurora from them, okay, is just blowing, like, just, we could see legs, and we could see arms coming out the top. And then when they hit each other, they make a slapping sound. They open hand slap to create that thunderous crack that is an imitation of the events that occur in the sky when the clash of the Titans occurred. This is when we wrote it all down, because we went through 2,000 years of, things are chill. Oh, look how all the pretty lights are getting, all the colors are getting weird. Oh, it's getting a little out of hand. Oh, look, the little hat and the little thing. Oh, okay, we'll imitate those now. That'll be cool. Yeah, we'll do that. And then suddenly Jupiter came in and went, "Screw you all," and boom, right on through the whole thing. And lightning and thunder lightning bolts are thrown at each other. "I'm going to kill you, Dad." And then of course Venus and Mars went flinging off in every direction, probably Titan too, wherever they all went, and they're traveling out now because of this confluence and what they slowed down. They started traveling outwards. Into deeper and deeper into the underworld. We gathered a bunch of rings, probably from all the debris, and we're sitting there watching you have to pass this river to get to the underworld and the Grim Reaper and all that stuff. The heaven is not there anymore. I mean, we're on our own, and the balance of the water just rebalanced, so we're all totally screwed up. I mean, the flood was devastating, killed most of us, and we're just going. So, and remember how we did those cool machines? And they couldn't do that even if they could. And let's also remember that a lot of their stuff that they used to go to were high on mountains and stuff. And now traveling up mountains is incredibly lethal. Not so bad when your gravity's 0.3. You're going to hit the ground at 55 kilometers an hour from a very high height, which, by the way, not pretty, but survivable. It's totally survivable. You be happy. I mean, if you hit the ground, and landing on the other? No. I just mean if you had a parachute and you were going down in a parachute right now, when you hit the ground, you're trying to go between 30 and 50 kilometers an hour when you hit the ground. Okay, it's not pretty. Okay, but you don't die from it. See what I mean? So you could build giant things on the sides of cliffs with this malleable rock and build these Sierra Lankan temples that you have to climb the edges of mountains to get up to. No one would really care, because if you fell off, you go, "I'll see you next time. Don't forget to tell Mom I'll be up in like a half an hour. I have to climb this thing again." While he's falling.
It wouldn't kill you. I really like that. I like that door, the third row, second door, the blue one.
This one?
Yeah, I like that one. It's good.
Third row, second door. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you can see that's the symbol.
Yeah.
Same symbol, and they're everywhere. If you look at if we went to,
Saturn
old 4-poster beds.
Saturn theory not only matches like mythology-wise, it also matches scientifically. The oxygen, salt, and air are the same in Saturn's rings than they are.
I did not know that.
Yes.
Well, maybe it yanked a bunch of water. Well, actually, it did. I'm not even kidding. When it was vaporizing, the northern part of the planet and scouring it clean. Mm-hmm. And remember what geodes are like. If you ever thought about them, they have a dent at the top and a bump at the bottom. Well, the Earth is a dent at the top and a bump at the bottom. The bottom being, of course, Antarctica. The dent being, of course, the ocean where all this water was pouring into, and all this electricity was going, and then creating a giant fog bank, which is then raining down snow across all of the northern hemisphere and just creating a giant ice age. Because that snow is fresh, it went practically into space and came back down. But the parts that didn't go back down must have went to Saturn or Mars or up that pipe, you know. I'm not trying to say that, but the idea, that it took some is one thing. Plus, also, it rained some down back on us. And of course, we had that's why it was so nice for them when they said, why do we find dead mammoths with buttercups in their stomachs type of thing? That seems rather weird. Well, it's not when you realize that the fresh water was coming from these glaciers, and as soon as you get out of the rings and the shadow, of this giant tube that's leading up to the sky, as soon as you get out of that radius, that shadow, it's sunny. I mean, the lights from the at night are from Saturn, and the lights in the day are from the sun, and you're just it's warm, it's great. Lush water, birds, everything. They were just having a great time until suddenly flash frozen. Well, why is it flash frozen? Well, it left, and the water poured down not where they were standing. But over around. Some would, of course, but it would flood over through the Atlantic Ocean and Pacific Ocean, and well up in the middle of the equator. They'd go bloop, and then disperse again. So it was quite possible. Got so high up that it went all the way to. Just 1 second. Am I in a call somewhere? Oh my God, I am. Okay, 1 second.
Okay.
No, I'm good.
All right.
So, long story short, that would have been a massive flood to anyone who lived through it. It would have topped mountains and so forth, yes.
No doubt about it.
As it rebalanced, because, if you can imagine the moon holds up so much water and the sun pulls so much water, well, imagine the water being pulled up by a gigantic planet that's up there, and two other ones too. Yeah. And they're going to
I just found out. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just thinking about that and how much, when it comes back down, it's going to make a mess of things.
I just heard Mr. Farrell say something about Mars. Mars is in the news for something. Oh, my goodness. Oh, they found a bunch of water on Mars. Subsurface water.
Yeah, there has to be subsurface.
Enough to cover the planet 4 to 8 meters deep. So it's pretty sizable amount.
Yeah, well, you should see.
I would have think that, the reason why I say that is because I would have thought that when Saturn flooded the Earth, it most likely should have flooded Saturn too.
Mars?
Mars too, yeah.
No, I don't think it did. I don't think Saturn flooded the way that you think it flooded.
No?
No, I think it's more to do with being inside the coma. Remember, there was a time at what we call, lack of a better term, creation. Right. In the Velikovsky, David Talbot era, and before we started piecing together everything about how these things were moving around, they didn't know, about the electricity aspect of it. Like, you don't think about planets not being able to hit each other because they have positive cores. It just doesn't make sense if you don't understand that. And that's fine. But understanding that north and south, these planets are going to line up, and they're going to fall in the main field of Saturn is so big that we were inside of it. Even with those other three planets separating us and Mars and Saturn. So there's two planets between us and Saturn. So we must be 1 million or 2 miles away from this darn thing. And we were still, oh my God, so inside its magnetic field. The magnetic field of Jupiter and Saturn are, like, if you look at the planet, as a just where it is now, you would have no trouble. It would look like if you could see it, it would just look like, it would be like maybe 1 or 2 quarters in size at arm's length.
Yes.
Like the moon is only about an aspirin size or a Tylenol size.
That's the size of an aspirin, yeah.
But if you go and imagine putting 2 quarters together and seeing that thing up in the sky, that's about how big Andromeda is. But you can barely see Andromeda unless you're living in a real nice spot. Light pollution. But that's all I'm thinking is.
It has to be life. Just has to be.
Well, we just talked about it. The fact that life, if pestilence doesn't sound good, okay, but pestilence is life, just coming from another planet. In this case, the one from Mars, it brings pestilence whenever its atmosphere gets close to ours. So yeah, there must be some microbes living in the atmosphere or something like that, and then they're in a charged environment for extended periods. Because remember, it was around at this time when we were talking about it having pestilence, it was the Hercules event where it was coming down, getting close to us, and then going back towards Venus and so forth. Did that 12 times, the 12 labors of Hercules. That situation is what caused the pestilence when it got close to us. Mars did the same thing, or Venus did the same thing when it got close to us. Mercury, apparently, when it got close to us, destroyed our ability to speak.
Wonder why?
No, I'm being honest. As far as anyone could tell, when Mercury came by and the Tower of Babel went up, because it wasn't a thing that they were building, okay? It was a tower.
Went by quick, too.
Yeah, well, when you talk about the past, we talked about Horus rising on his mountain, right? Mm-hmm. That's different than, because that's a mountain, because we didn't have structures back then. But later, we had structures. So we said the Tower of Babel. So it was a tower that was being built to the sky. But what it was a big plasmoid thing reaching towards Mercury when it got too close. And when that touched it from our thing, we invented new languages all over the world.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, did it fry our brains? Like, in a way, did our children have to invent new languages? What's going on here? It's crazy to think about.
We got noisy. We had to start talking.
Well, or alternately, it drained the last amount of power that allowed us to, and I hate to go all new agey or whatever, because I'm not really a big into that, but it is possible that if we lived in a much more electrical environment, that the idea of transmitting thoughts or receiving thoughts like we were radios,
right?
Totally honest radios, by the way, which would suck. We would have no duplicity, which could explain why duplicity is a new invention. Like, we think that the invention of religion to screw everyone over and control them. No. These people were trying to deal with real things in the sky, and they had no science. I really got to stress that enough, that these people did not have a clue. All they could do is go tell stories and frighten everybody. Not that they wanted to. They were basically sharing trauma. Okay, and we share trauma all the way down to the lines. That's how we did it. But I personally think that's not something that we should dwell on. Like, getting over it would be recognizing that it happened, number one, that it freaked us out as a species, but it also invented everything. And if science is supposed to be complete, then in actuality, religion has to become part of science. And I don't mean that it has to become part of science that we have to believe it, but it should be studied like as any other science. I mean, we're smart enough to understand the psychology that goes into these type of things. And we just have to take that and reverse engineer the filter and sort of begin to see what they were actually talking about. Like, if you've been to, when I went to Wales, we went to an abbey, and every single thing in that abbey was related to the stars, and you would never know it. It was built in the 1300s, and you had no clue, okay, about anything. But one of the examples is, if you go up the stairs, okay, you go up 27 and a half stairs, okay, to make it to the moon room, but to make it to the holy processional moon room, you have to go up 29 and a half stairs. Now, why is that? It makes no sense to me initially until someone pointed out, no, it's 27 and a half days before the moon is in the same position, but it's 29 days and a quarter before it's in the same stars again. So it's like this whole building is basically an astrological map that you couldn't tear down. And that's and these guys had to know that in the 1300s, what they were talking about. This is before Copernicus. So these people, and I'm saying that they knew that the Earth went around the sun or anything weird like that, because it didn't matter. What mattered was the calculations were right. And you could do them with a certain number of these gears and so forth. But what they were trying to prove and say is that these things are related. Religion and astral phenomenon, or things in space, are directly related.
Yeah.
And that is something that's hard for some people, especially when they go, well, he saw an angel. Well, he probably saw a plasmoid, freaked out, had a schizoid event, and talked to it. That's much more likely. And who wouldn't? I would. If I didn't have remotely the education to tell me what I was looking at, you don't know what you're looking at. I mean, it would be, and for those who've never been in that type of situation, because they're kind of rare today, it's like waking up in another person's house, forgetting you went to bed there, and not recognizing where the windows are or anything, and you're in the dark.
Yeah.
That's what it's like. And that's why you would be confused. You would believe what you were seeing. Like, let's say you were half drugged out of your mind and sitting there and it's all dark and everything, and a kid comes in wearing, having one of those, I don't know, a Tony Stark mask on, wanders around, picks up a toy and leaves. Your brain is not going to understand what it just saw. Like you're going to be saying, okay, no, I just saw a glowing thing float down to the floor. I heard some rumbling and it left. I don't know what happened. But that's what they're trying to tell you. They're trying to personify it, put it in a way that you can understand, at least in the originals. You have to throw away a lot of stuff. Like when they're talking about Jesus, actually, a lot of the allegories are about resistance to not only Roman, but Jewish law. Like when he went and said, when Jesus was talking to the people in the temple, then went out and beat a fig tree with a stick. Jesus did not hate fig trees. There was a whole allegory there that we didn't even understand because we're modern.
Yeah.
And they know what they're talking about because they're speaking in a sort of code. Like it would be like me going, instead of saying the Romans had a tax system that allowed people to blah, 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 and they could talk all scientific about it. But me and you at that time would say, yeah, I got a little bit of a pokey from the government there. You got some coins from the government. I know this, and you got it for some project or whatever they're doing. But you would talk about it completely differently than the people who are studying it, which is also a lot of the problems that we tend to make things very holy when they might not have been.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so sacred, we would never build a temple for people to go into. Yeah, they would.
Yeah.
Do you know why? Because they didn't think their society was going to end.
Yeah.
That's it. It's like it's like
No doubt
it's
that's
like
true. Yeah.
well, it's like a bank vault.
Everyone did.
In a way, they built some of those things like bank vaults. They didn't have to be manned. They could leave for the day, come back. Everything would still be there because no one could get through in one night to get into that vault because they had a portcullis on it, the great one in China or the Great Pyramid of Giza. Anyway, you go into bank vaults today, they do this exact same thing. They basically know that it's tough enough that you can't break into it overnight. We'll be here in the morning. That's all they had to do. Yeah. They didn't think that, yeah, there's going to be a giant flood. Things are going to get totally killed. Your society is going to be destroyed. The Berbers are going to come in, not know what the hell you're talking about, and they're going to break into this thing over the course of whatever. And that could explain why, when they finally did break in, they broke in a way that was conducive to getting things out that were too big. That means that things that were put in there originally. That's the one thing I did learn about that I thought was very interesting.
Oh, something else you taught me too. When they always have these Orthodox priests all drab, all garbed up, with all this shiny stuff, and they got a rope for like a belt. Strung down. And you told me that was so that when they were in the room with what was that certain
Ark of the Covenant,
and they would die, they could pull them out by that rope. I thought,
that's correct.
How genius is that? I never knew that. That was something.
Oh yeah. They it's a thing. And now the thing is that since these people don't understand death. Okay, so let's just put that. They don't understand it, at least not in any way that we understand. In fact, sometimes these people were so out of their friggin' minds that they would talk to idols. And that's why idol worship was a problem.
Yeah.
Because schizophrenic people talk to dogs, let alone golden idols.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, these are people who chopped off heads and put them on spikes, not as a warning, but so these people that they chopped the heads off to could tell the people that came how they got their heads chopped off. Not that they really could, but their person walking into that would see all these heads, and each one of them, to them, might be moaning at them. Imagine how hellish that stuff is. And the reason I talk like that, that belief is very, very powerful. I mean, we've all heard about the stories of these African hunters with their little whistles, and if they ever whistle at you, they kill you. And people who believe that will die.
Wow, I never heard of that.
Yeah, it was a I remember watching about it in the 1970s and 80s. About the power of the mind, but it was also brought up in Julian Jaynes' book, The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind from 1976. That book being the foundation of Westworld and a bunch of other things, the modern one.
Well, these African tribes all have, and Native Americans, for that matter, these fantastic creation stories.
Well, not only that, they have true belief, which we don't have.
No, that's true.
Like if I didn't have science, I honestly fear for this when I think about it. If I did not have science backing me up, like in the way that I could formally think that I'm doing the right thing and thinking about things correctly and trying to be mature and trying to help, honestly, I would probably just be an evangelist priest with a good charisma that would be ripping people off.
Yeah.
Not deliberately, but because I believed it, or because it was real. You could see it in the sky. Like it was real. I mean, I would definitely be sitting there going, "Oh no, we can convince these guys not to do this." I mean, look, let's get 2 or 3 virgins, do the whole, feed them to the Dark Lords or whatever, and this thing will go away. You know what I mean? Like because these people they had I mean, obviously they were safe for a long period of time, and obviously, I know there was one flood in real life and then one flood in the sky. And there are different floods. Some people think the Great Flood, was the one where Saturn left and did the fight. Okay, and that became, this is anything. So this puts that time at the younger Dryas type of era.
There was more than one, right? There's at least two, right?
Well, that's what I mean. But some of them were not unearthed.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is they were when we moved, the aurora, the green aurora, covered a lot of the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And that appeared to be a giant flood to us.
I see.
And it did affect us, yes. There was other events that occurred with that, but it wasn't like the Epic of Gilgamesh flood, which was a whole, Noah thing. That seems like a big thing. But you see where we're at. We're trying to piece together parts of history. The only thing I can rest assured is that if you think about it, they were just hearing some of the things that they talk about, like the aspect of using, hearing the voice of God between the thorns of the burning bush, and then how he did the exact same thing with the wings of the Ark of the Covenant. Well, that's just a oscillation between two thorns he was hearing.
It had to be like a capacitor, isn't it?
Well, what they did, honestly, in the burning bush that did not burn, you could do this today. Unfortunately, it would be a hard place to find, and it had to be dry. So you had to be up on a dry area, and you'd have to pour enough water or oil around this plant so that the water or oil would touch the groundwater. So you have a giant flat layer of sand, which is impermeable to electromagnetics. It's dry. But the water underneath can travel, and it goes up to the highest point, which is that tree. And the tree would give off an ethereal glow, a corona fire, a St. Elmo's fire. And it would spark, which you can see those today when you go look at, say, telescopes on the tops of mountains. You can always see coronal discharges along them because it's very windy, very dry. They're very high up. But in this situation here, you have this coronal glow happening around this bush, and then he hears the name of the God spoke between the thorns. And the name of God at the time was Yahweh. So if you just say, and it was repeating it over and over. So he was just saying Yahweh, 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 which is just an electrical oscillation. You can clearly hear it just in saying the words. The secret name of God. See, it's secret because it was sent by lightning bolts. See, you're not supposed to know it, but of course we do, because he couldn't shut up. And anyway, and they did the same thing. So they basically made a capacitor type of thing, likely out of this type of object, and created some sparks between the wings.
It must have been like hellishly freaking powerful,
Well, I think that the Earth
whatever happened to it
really charged up for a while.
Yeah.
Number one, gravity was changing, which was problematic because things that were big were dying, like giants and so forth. I mean, after the flood, there was like only two giants ever mentioned again. Og of Bashan, his sons, and of course Goliath. And that's it. That's the only giants we ever hear about.
It's the only giants, yeah, that's true.
But before that, they talk about, and I'm not trying to use that citation only, but they talk about all the animals that lived before things got smoked, which makes sense. Things were big. Then gravity changed probably the first time they got flung out of there. And those two plants went flying off into their own thing. Our charge was still charged up, but it was going down. The first step was to oof, and we suddenly a whole whack of animals could no longer live.
massive barrier discharge.
Well, if there is such a thing as gravity being affected by electrical charge, and again, that's pure.
I think it is electrical charge.
I would love to agree with you, but unfortunately, anyone who thinks about it knows that if you think about gravity like a magnet, okay, and you can go, wow, that magnet could really crush your hand, wow. Or that magnet is really sticking there, pretty powerful, but it takes a while, but I can get it pried off, with a crowbar, right?
Plasma and electricity created what we see, everything we see, just them two things.
Yeah. The neutralization.
That's how magic it is.
It pulled everything together, yeah. And that's why I have no, the idea that nuclear reactions that are occurring on the surface of the sun are not making new materials seems illogical to me. There should be.
Don't drop into the core, and that's why it's like it is.
And we get what we get on Earth, which are basically what are called veins of material.
Mm-hmm.
And veins is a nice way of saying a fractal spreading out through the Earth, like a fulgurite or something. And we should realize immediately that quartz is related somehow, property-wise, to gold. And it is. And that's weird. But it's not so weird if you're thinking about it in a nuclear sense. You're just moving protons around and not too many of them. And this is where you start realizing that if that's the case, and we're going way in the wrong direction on some of this stuff. We should be definitely, instead of just trying to heat things up, okay, to make plasma as we do, we should be making electrical situations and try to create a piece of ball lightning that we could sustain, keep that plasmoid going, seeing what we could do with it. That would be where, and I think, of course, the Sapphire Project probably is way farther along with this than I am. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, well, they got the loot. I just think, I really don't know what kind of situation they're in. Oh, that reminds me. Andy told me that you are breathing life back into the electric view. Is that true?
I was thinking about doing some things.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's exciting, man. I can give you some link help and stuff,
Well, that would be good.
Help you get going, for sure.
Well, I already have everything in the server. I need to get a new hard drive, and I need to get two new hard drives, and that will be when I will feel I have the software I need now and everything. It's all legit, all paid for, and so it's
just heard talking. I don't know where it came from. Not you, something else. Oh well.
That's
must be me. So yeah, that's good. So when do you think you're going to start back up, or have you already?
It needs a bit more and an outro.
Oh, I see what it is. I got the. In case anyone from Patreon wants to join, I have my mic and headphones turned on in Discord, so you can.
That's what was happening to me too. I forgot I was in a room, and am I hearing someone else talk?
Yeah. Well, that's really good. I hope that that you get it going, because we need you back. It'd be good to see you back, man.
It has been obviously challenging.
Yeah, for sure.
But obviously, I can't do the same type of schedule. I was just going way too hard. Mm-hmm. 2 years and 200 videos. That's too much.
Oh yeah, I know. I've been going at it for 6 now, but ever since I got diagnosed, I've kind of backed off the gas a little bit.
I am saving them all just in
trying to.
No, I get that.
Get through this, because sometimes it's just almost too much to bear. Really.
Well,
why me?
I have a friend who's who I who I care about, and yes, she had cancer, and yeah, she definitely needed a friend. So
Yeah, but I mean, I'm fortunate in many ways because this could have been going on inside of me somewhere else, and then I'd find out and wouldn't,
you wouldn't be able to do anything.
do anything. So at least
I'm suspicious anytime I am exceptionally tired.
Yes. Yes.
Like if I start,
I don't seem to get tired anymore, Neil.
Well, no, I don't know, but if something like I only know that usually besides like a physical symptom, like that would be obvious, and getting some checkups, because now that I'm getting a bit older, it's probably a good idea. But at the other end of the spectrum, you're, I always heard that, if you have a severe change of energy over a short period of time, that's a good sign. You should get checked out. Right.
Yeah, and having cancer is kind of like having diabetes, or having something that you got to live with. In so many ways. I mean, for people who are fortunate, they can battle it for a few years before it gets them. But it always seems to get them. But I'm going about the treatment thing on my own, and that's scary. I need help. I'm going to reach out to an alternative place, because my doctor, he doesn't really talk to me anymore. He's mad at me.
Well,
I don't want to make
I'm glad I don't have a doctor that's mad at me. No,
he's like,
I'm glad he's not mad at me. I mean,
yeah,
I've been quite direct, but one of the things that I've realized that does make me happy is making others happy, and helping to
share your knowledge.
Yeah, because I hate to say it, but I've not unlike, and I don't know how to say it, but not unlike influencers who are trying to get catchy titles, fear mongering about things is wrong. Like recently, I saw some Electric Universe Associated channel say something like, in big bold letters, the AT&T outage was caused by a burst of energy from the sun or something. And I was like, no. Because that's not how computers work.
Let's see.
I mean, I'll give you an example. If you gave a burst that could disrupt that system, it would be a burst that could disrupt the electrical system. And we'd feel that a little bit more. The AT&T thing, if it was like, or whatever it was there, with whoever company, if it turned out to be an electrical switch, it couldn't happen over everywhere at once, and it would affect a lot of locals too, because they're all plugged in the same way. Machines would be toasted, like Wi-Fi routers and modems and stuff. If for some reason that could do that only to those things. And that's why, I mean, it's just not feasible for that to have been the answer. And of course, a couple days later, it turned out that it was simply a software bug, or at least that's what they're telling us. And I'm like, I don't know why it would matter. I mean, it was probably a software bug, which is exactly what you would expect. Something that could be, that would screw up the network, but not like destroy, like electricity destroys things, like blows things up. If you know what I mean? Like it's, I mean, even, and it would affect more systems than that and more people than that. And you would have an area, and then there'd be guys from the news saying, "Holy crap, the sun did this."
Skype? Yeah, because people are, like, I was saw a Dark Journalist recently where they were talking about Mars, and here's the thing: they don't know how Jonathan Swiss could have known that where the Mars moons are 100 years before they were discovered. Because
they sometimes try to make the mathematical assumption that since there was 4 discovered by Galileo for Jupiter,
Oh, I see.
then there should have been 2 for Mars because there's 1 for us.
Well, he correctly named them.
No,
And,
that's the problem.
times, yes.
No, you're not wrong on that. I just said some people make the argument.
Well, the thing that they miss is, can't they see that it had to be closer?
Yes, but they can't accept that because to them it moves in a clockwise fashion, and all their computers say it has done this forever in the past. We can just scroll back in time using our computers. That's the problem. Math has overrid common sense.
Yeah.
People who work in electrical engineering, I know that the government might be playing around with let's try to make multidimensional shit happen.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're right, like the electric universe people are right, as much as I hate to say it, there will never be a wormhole. We might invent teleportation, but we're never going to get to the point where there's no black holes, all that disappears.
No, I know that, yeah. And you don't think wormholes are possible?
Well, they're an extension of the same thing. You enter in one black hole, where do you come out? Well, maybe you come out somewhere else. Well, they postulate this would be a way of going through the apple, the apple being the universe, and ergo the term wormhole. It's not, it's an imaginary thing. It's just like saying there's 11 dimensions. Why? Because it's in our head. Logically, you're misusing logic. Logic can also, make you do that whole thing where I think the first one was like, man is an upright bipedal, hairless thing, or whatever he said it was, animal. And then someone basically plucked a chicken, threw it on the middle of the thing, and said, "Behold, a man." See? I am.
Yeah.
What? Be right down. Looks like I have to go soon.
You gotta go soon?
I do.
Okay.
This has been a good conversation anyway.
It always has been. It always is with you. We enjoy the heck out of it, man.
We definitely should do it again. Perhaps you could set something up for the future people. This is we can do like if this is going to be displayed for an upcoming thing, I could stay after and we could continue a show.
Oh, that would be beautiful. I'm just I'm formulating something that's going to be steady and regular because I'm such a scattered mess. I'm dislocated, I'm
I'm the same way.
Fascinating, spontaneous guy, No,
that is totally fine. We're all like that. You don't get around to, just having the wherewithal to go through things and take things that and want to know. And some people might think I downplay things or whatever, but I'm not trying to. I'm really trying to help people understand that sometimes there's nothing to fear.
Right.
Although, admittedly, if you want some existential dread, like we talked about before, we have no idea when the sun's going to go out.
Right. I want to have.
That being said,
I want to have some kind of a platform where I'll show a video, and then after the video, we'll have a talk.
Well, sure. I'd love that.
I'd love for you to be a part of that.
Of course.
We'll get Rick and maybe Adusa. We'll have a few people, a couple girls. It'll be cool.
I agree.
I just got to get more together with my whole thing. The patrons put up with me.
No, and I appreciate the fact that they do.
Yeah.
I remember when I stopped doing it, someone was still trying to give me money. I'm like, no, I'm not making a show. I can't take it back.
I know,
You know.
I know.
And you know what? These guys, they're good. They're really good people. I mean, they understand. I mean, I'll do it for them. And if I'm putting stuff out, oh please. But also, I have to realize I had to back off because, I mean, I had a system down and I was going through it, and I was like, oh my God, I'm just going through one of these a week, and it's crazy. I got some great people to talk to.
Right.
You know, that was fun. And I hope
A great show. Andy, you were pretty quiet. It's a great show. Andy, you were pretty quiet tonight. Hey.
Yes, hey, Andy.
Yeah, I know you're enjoying yourself. But Greg,
guess-
you've got to remember, you've had to quiet down a little bit too, because at the end of the day, you were doing, again, 7 days a week, 14, 15 hours a day doing them videos, and
I was.
you found the same thing. You just had to back off because you got to have a bigger picture in life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you stop getting out and enjoying the little things as well, because it becomes consuming. A bit like video games.
And there's another one. That's another one too. But when I thought about one thing that was really destroying me is that I couldn't keep up with all the stuff coming out, because when I wasn't making shows or being on the shows, I didn't necessarily want to go research these things, because I mean, I was learning, but at the same time, I was like, oh my God, there's so much stuff to learn. And I had to take a step back and realize, no, I'm just basically regurgitating things. I need to learn more.
You know, I got to a point where I'm being too cerebral. I let my body go, and humans were not meant to be in one place for a long time. We were meant to be mobile.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that is true.
Your body starts going south if you don't get mobile. So I have to make sure I keep myself in
Yes, you do. Well, anyway, folks,
all right, guys. That
was fantastic. And let's do it. Let's do it again.
We will.
The thing I like about this is you got a group of people with some common interests, and you sit down and have a discussion, and that's what I like about it. You know, like, we're not going to really change the world.
No.
But also we can add some new insights and not trying to just go, hey, this is the common thing. I mean, I don't think that anyone says cryptids. Are they hillbilly dog spawn? That's never occurred before, and that happened because we were just talking. So and hopefully now in 3 years you're going to see a whole whack of hillbilly dog spawns, the cryptids, and you're like, haha, we caused that. You know, we'll laugh a little bit, because don't worry, this is all part of it's all being recorded now. Well, somebody in the future is going to put YouTube in a chronological order like it's Wikipedia, and we'll never know. Be long after us.
Fascinating discussion, Neil.
Definitely.
We'll get together soon tonight.
Take care again.
See you.
So let's go to the heart of the matter, because, incredibly, mass is undefined. In every textbook and encyclopedia, the amount of mass is confused with the amount of matter, perhaps because they both begin with the letter M. This means that no scientist understands E equals mc squared. This confusion allows particle physicists to talk of creation and annihilation of matter, which is impossible without understanding what matter is. It's not physics. E equals mc squared is simply telling us that mass is a measure of the amount of energy held in matter. Particles have no mass, we're told. Armed with this ignorance, the standard particle model says subatomic particles have no intrinsic mass, which is nonsense. Are they saying protons and electrons have no rest mass, no energy? It seems so. In the standard particle model, mass is provided externally by a kind of cosmic treacle of imaginary Higgs bosons. The total cost of finding something, dubbed the Higgs boson at the Large Hadron Collider, ran over $13 billion in July 2012. At a running cost of $1 billion a year, that makes up more than $17 billion wasted chasing the grin of the Cheshire cat. The LHC operates like smashing countless jumbo jets into mountains and picking over the debris to see how they fly. But the whole is more than the sum of the bits we can see. We are not dealing with closed systems. Even worse, it's like asking one of Douglas Adams' telephone hygienists to do the investigation. The investigators are not properly trained. Energy is undefined. All you will find in textbooks are examples of different forms of energy. The Big Bang is supposed to have originated from pure energy, which is nonsense when energy only makes sense in relation to matter in motion, with respect to all other matter. But matter hasn't been defined in any physical sense involving sensible internal movement. The quantum realm is weird. It's admitted by leading physicists that no one understands quantum mechanics. It's incompatible with Einstein's postulate of no instantaneous information transfer, and it seems to involve even the experimenter's thoughts in the outcome of some experiments. Once again, any experiment is not a closed system, as physicists like to assume. That is why the quantum realm appears weird. Light and the electric force are mysteriously transferred through empty space. We have all experienced the force between two magnets. What's happening in the space between them? The pioneers of electromagnetism knew there has to be a medium to transfer the electric force. They called it the ether. The ether has to be an electrically polarizable medium that fills the universe. In that way you can daisy chain the electric force directly. It's a longitudinal force. And applying the speed of light limit to that makes no sense whatsoever, because light is a wave motion. I think I've said before, that's like the difference between pulling on a rope and feeling the tug at the other end almost instantly, and waving one end of the rope and waiting for the wave to get to the other end. Light is a slow process in the universe. So if we have this ether that fills the universe, space is full. There's no such thing as a perfect vacuum. Einstein knew that there has to be an ether, but his postulates somehow did away with it. He admitted that his theory of relativity would fail if the Earth's motion through the ether were detected. That's because his inertial frames of reference would not be equivalent. It would be like having one observer experiencing a gentle breeze from the ether wind while another might be suffering a howling gale. As it turns out, Dayton Miller repeated the Michelson-Morley ether experiments far more rigorously and at different elevations. He found an ether drift. Sadly, left hemisphere training denied and quickly forgot this fact. So let's have a look at the standard particle model. An atom, once a promise of fundamental simplicity, is really a nucleus within a hazy, probabilistic fog of electrons. The nucleus is some protons and neutrons held together by the mysterious short-range nuclear or strong force. The particles in the nucleus have a hidden, unknown number of weird, undetectable bits inside. These bits are appearing and disappearing in defiance of a principle of science that miracles are forbidden. Meanwhile, a recent report from the Large Hadron Collider suggests new findings that don't fit this model. Here's a snapshot of a proton by Professor Matthew Strassler. He writes, imagine all of the quarks, up, down and strange, that is U, D and S, anti-quarks, U, D and S with a bar on top, and gluons, a G, zipping around near the speed of light, banging into each other and appearing and disappearing. So a proton is said to be some quarks held together by some gluons, which are themselves the quantized manifestations of the strong force. There is no mention of how a force manifests as a particle. It gets much worse. A gluon is really one of several colours of gluon, but it also has the simultaneous property of anticolour. Gluons mediate the interaction between quarks, but they also mediate the interaction between themselves and quarks. That's right, gluons are the strong force, but they also experience the strong force. Happily for the physicists, quarks are unobservable in principle because they only exist inside the nucleon. It's very convenient. This is simple. You can forget elegance. This is extreme, narrow, left hemisphere focus on a model with no basic definitions to make sense of the words being used. Andrew Pickering, the author of Constructing Quarks, who did a sociological study of particle physics, and it's an interesting book, says there's no obligation on anyone to take account of what 20th century science has to say. To listen too closely to scientists may be simply to stifle the imagination, that is the right hemisphere. Worldviews are cultural products. There is no need to be intimidated by them. We come to the electric universe model of the atom. The electrically neutral atom is made of charged particles, positive and negative, in equal numbers, together with a number of neutral particles called neutrons, stating the obvious. All subatomic particles are real, with real locations in space. It's not a probabilistic fog. There is a polarizable ether which transmits force and carries electromagnetic waves. The universe is full of an electrically neutral, perfect fluid of neutral particles which passes through atoms and celestial bodies practically as if they weren't there. Neutrinos fit this description. So, the electric universe then defines what it means by energy and mass. Energy is matter in motion relative to the matter in the rest of the universe. It used to be said in relation to the fixed stars. This is not a closed system approach. It is a unifying relational concept first articulated by Ernst Mach. So we define mass. Particle distortion is instead of acceleration in response to the electric forces from all other matter in the universe. It's a bit like pushing a balloon full of water. It will tend to distort rather than move. And it's the same with these orbital systems of electrons and protons and so on. Once again, this conforms with Ernst Mach's principle. Neutrons may not exist in the nucleus. If so, only two particles are necessary to build all of the elements. This idea came from Edwin Karl, who I'm pleased to say is here and will be presenting in the breakout room. And the problem for physicists is, how do you hold together all of the positive charges in the nucleus? They should repel one another very powerfully. The repulsion of those positive charged protons should prevent it from forming in the first place. However, atomic nuclei seem to require neutrons for stability. That's because when a radioactive atom nucleus decays, neutral particles are sometimes observed to leave the nucleus and exist for a few minutes before further decaying into an electron and a proton. So it was assumed such a neutral particle pre-existed in the nucleus. The what-if question wasn't asked, that maybe that wasn't so. This is an assumption which still does not explain how the positive nucleus remains cohesive. So a special short-range strong nuclear force was invented, a proliferation of forces and particles. Edwin Karl suggested a simpler solution. If the electrons remain as discrete particles in the nucleus, they will tend to arrange themselves to, on average, sit equidistant between the protons. Because the distance between the protons is greater than that between each proton and a neighbouring electron, the attractive electric force between the proton and electron, sorry if this is too fast, will be 4 times greater than the repulsive force. This simple hypothesis removes the need for an extra strong force within the nucleus. It's much simpler. And then it seems that neutrons are a short-lived, metastable resonance of a closely bound proton and electron. This is simple. The electric universe simply proposes structure within structure, a repeated pattern. To understand magnetism and gravity, we must go to the heart of matter, a similar approach to that of André-Marie Ampère, Carl Friedrich Gauss, Wilhelm Weber and Walter Ritz, who considered the behaviour of positive and negative charged particles of different mass with great success, but were ignored for political reasons. Chiefly they weren't English, I think. Here's a simple hypothesis. The electron and proton have stable, resonant orbital structures of smaller charged particles. In that case, the positron, that is the antiparticles, and antiproton are mirror particles. They're not antiparticles, they're mirrors. There is no antimatter, no creation or annihilation. But this requires that there be an ether of composite neutral particles of vanishingly small mass, the neutrinos. The neutrinos must be quite complex inside, but totally collapsed, so that they can accept energy and then become a particle and its mirror. But there's nothing, it's just assumed that when these particles seem to disappear, that they've annihilated, the matter has disappeared. That's not so. So the ether must be normal matter of vanishingly small mass composed of all the subparticles needed to split into an electron and a positron, for example, when subjected to the appropriate energy, electromagnetic energy. For stability, and this is one of the stumbling blocks, of course, for particle physicists to go this way, is that the electric force must act between the tiny particles within the atom instantly. No speed of light delay. The two stable particles, the electron and the proton, if we assume the neutron is just a metastable particle, form 254 stable nuclides plus another 85 metastable, that is radioactive nuclides, for a total of 339. So from this simple resonance systems of structure within structure, we have all of the materials we need to see, to make what we see in the world around us. When those nuclei combine with the requisite number of negative electrons to form atoms and molecules, the possibilities are boundless in the living world. What does this mean? Only a single force is necessary, the powerful, instantaneous electric force. The phenomenal strength of the naked electric force can be judged by the simple illustration in the lower left. This shows that if the charge passing through two 120-watt light bulbs in 1 second were to be transferred equally to two metal plates, the repulsive force between those plates would equal 1 million tons. So it's critical that the electric force is a balanced force, attractive or repulsive. And these two propositions are the epitome of elegant simplicity. Balance. The little diagram there on the left, extreme left at the top, shows the attraction between positive and negative and the repulsion between like particles. There are two forms of the electric force that we experience. One is the electrostatic, where you have separated charge some distance apart, and the electric dipole, where the distance between the two charges becomes so small that the field is altered and you get a different effect called the dipole field. So it just depends on the degree of separation of a positive and negative charge. It's a difference in scale. On our scale, we experience the dipole field of atomic electric fields and subatomic electric fields in the form of magnetism and gravity. They are dipole fields. So both forms of the electrostatic and the dipole field occur between atoms and is responsible for chemistry. The E-force operates between all of the particles and subparticles within each atom. In close proximity, this can result in distortion of the atoms to form electric dipoles themselves, which can result in attraction to form a molecule. Or they may enter a new resonant dance by sharing an electron as chemistry. The dipole distorting action on electrons and protons produces dipolar magnetism. The diagram there is actually, I made a mistake, the positive and negative on left and right should be reversed. But this just shows that if you, let's try this thing here. If you have an electric field operating on a particle here, charged particle here, and accelerating it, and on the opposite side, decelerating it, the result will be an elliptical orbit with the nucleus at one of the focuses. And the result of this is that you get a transverse dipole, and that transverse dipole is shown there as the magnetic force, because if you have two current-carrying wires where the electric field in the wire is causing this distortion in electrons, then the dipoles are aligned so that they tend to attract, and we know that current flowing down two wires in the same direction attract, in the opposite way they repel. Okay, so, and the other thing is that I mentioned there ultra-weak dipolar gravity. And this is the diagram of what happens to an atom in that case. The gravitational field cannot be shielded from, so the gravitational force operates on the heavy nucleus so that it falls towards one of the focuses of an ellipse. This time it's oriented radially towards the surface of the body. But the interesting thing about that is that once you've said that, this means that a body like the Earth and the Moon, which I've shown here, the negative poles on both bodies are facing outwards, which means they're repelling one another. So it means that it's long-range repulsive, short-range attractive. We on the surface of the Earth are like iron filings. We don't care which magnet we go to, just the nearest one will do. The gravitational mass of the distant galaxies had a fundamental influence over the motion of the bodies in the solar system, and this is actually shown by precession of the perihelion of the planets, which is tied to the distant stars and not to the sun or general relativity, because general relativity doesn't have a reference frame like that. Short-term changes in the Earth's magnetic field that occur over periods of just years or decades have now been shown in new research to have a very close relationship with changes in gravity. The two are very similar forces. There is no gravitational collapse in space, no black hole swallowing everything. It is the electromagnetic force alone that coalesces matter in deep space. So the assumption that gravity was the controlling force on the large scale is incorrect. There is no need for a big bang to separate everything initially. Gravity is a balanced force like magnetism and cannot form neutron stars or other fanciful supercondensed celestial objects. A planet's gravity is established at its birth by powerful electromagnetic forces. And once the body is formed and the charge on the surface is established, the gravitational field is set by both the surface charge and the initial coalescence by electromagnetic forces. So the outcome of all that is that all matter in the local universe is connected by the electric force instantly. That's Mach's principle. The origin of mass and quantum spooky connection. Because this force is instantaneous, the so-called entanglement and non-locality suddenly has a simple explanation. And energy is a measure of motion with respect to the matter in the rest of the universe. Mass is a measure of the energy stored in the orbital motion inside a particle. And simultaneity means there is a universal time and three-dimensional space. We return to the sanity and simplicity of classical physics. These matter resonances are interesting too because having an orbital structure allows resonant instantaneous connections and complex interactions, which explains weird quantum behavior. The important thing is that the electron and proton have an orbital charge structure like atoms, which explains their internal energy and their magnetic moment. And distortion in an electric field appears as an increase in mass rather than acceleration. Quantum tunneling. In transistors, electrons face a barrier like the illustration in the diagram. It's like having to carry a weight over a hill. But in a weird quantum phenomenon called tunneling, the electron passes through the barrier as if there's a tunnel. The electric universe model of the electron and proton, having an orbital structure of oppositely charged particles, allows us to see that the hill or the repulsive electrical force between similar charges can instantly disappear or become a downhill race. The reason is that the force between two similar particles can become attractive instead of repulsive if you get the particles together at just the right moment. In chemistry, this resonance is achieved by the use of a heavy metal catalyst, which has numerous internal subatomic resonances. The same catalytic process is available, in my opinion, for nuclear fusion. So-called warm fusion is possible by nuclear chemistry. catalyzing the nuclei to attract instead of repel. So catalytic chemistry is possible, in my opinion, in the photospheric plasma of all bright stars, where the nuclei are separated from the electrons and can actually come close together in the presence of the heavy elements we see in the spectrum. And you've got to ask the question then, is this the path to future power? Like the sun, but only unlike the sun that is believed by present science. In this way, all stars generate the heavy elements in their photospheres where we detect them in their spectra. Rare exploding supernovae are the most ineffectual production means imaginable, because having produced it, you then disperse it into deep space. There's also an unsuspected resonant means of connection in living systems. The morphic field of Sheldrake, the mind-body connection, consciousness, subtle energies. The electric universe model explains biological transmutations at body temperature as demonstrated by Dr. Louis Kervran. His is a clear demonstration of this simple process. Is light a wave or a particle? If so, what's waving? Einstein did away with a medium to wave. Or is light a particle, a photon? It can't be both a wave and a particle. You'll notice they've mealy-mouthed term there. It's particle-like, they say. It's a meaningless use of language. If so, according to Einstein, to travel at the speed of light, it must have zero mass. But a particle of zero mass has no energy. You can't multiply zero by infinity and get a real number. And if it's got zero mass, it can't be affected by gravity, so there can be no gravitational lensing. Lensing occurs as a simple atmospheric diffraction effect in the ether. It's like an atmosphere around the body. Evidence from stars at the Galactic Centre show no gravitational lensing as expected from standard theory. Clearly, we depend on light to observe the universe, but we don't understand light. Photons don't exist. Light is a transverse electrical disturbance in the ether. And the ether must be a dielectric medium to transfer an electrical disturbance. The wave carries energy through the medium. Let's catch up here. It gives the appearance that a photon has travelled between the sender and the receiver. It's appearance only. Talking about light brings us to cosmological redshift. Hubble found the fainter and smaller a galaxy appeared, the higher was its redshift. In the diagram, you can see the spectral lines of hydrogen move progressively to the red end of the spectrum as the distance is thought to increase. The redshift was simply assumed to be due to velocity away from us, by analogy with the Doppler shift of sound. Hubble's law is considered the first observational basis for the expansion of the universe. But ironically, Hubble thought it the least likely explanation. He felt it more likely indicated some new physics. So it was Hubble's professional astronomer assistant, Helton C. Arp, who later proved this to be so. If the redshift is not simply a Doppler effect, Hubble wrote, the region observed appears as a small, homogeneous, but insignificant portion of a universe extended indefinitely both in space and time. Recently and surprisingly, more distant galaxies seem to be accelerating away from us. This discovery won the Nobel Prize and gave rise to the need for huge amounts of mysterious dark energy to power the acceleration. I read about that discovery on October the 6th, 2011. The discovery of the acceleration of the expanding universe is an interpretation based on total ignorance of the real nature of stars and the standard candle, which was used as the measurement to determine the distance away. So it was gratifying to find support once more in a report this month titled, Could a New Type of Supernova Eliminate Dark Energy? It has been found that the near UV light from the most distant supernovae is brighter than the closer ones. In other words, there's something going on at the atomic and subatomic level. Of course, this is unexpected and unexplained. The diagram on the left shows the difference between the Big Bang universe and the plasma universe. It's easy to see which one is simpler. Intrinsic redshift, and Dr. Halton Arp, Hubble's assistant, who was dubbed the modern Galileo, he found redshifts, quasars physically connected to and in front of, high redshift quasars rather, physically connected to and in front of low redshift active galaxies. This observation of a quasar between the galaxy NGC 7319 and the Earth is impossible if the quasar is over 90 times farther away than the galaxy. So Hubble was right. Something is wrong with physics. Arp showed the redshift happened in small jumps or quanta, which indicates a subatomic effect. But these quantum effects are supposed to only occur at the subatomic level. Here we've got it occurring on the galactic. This requires, once again, the electric force to be operating at ultra-high speed, instantaneously. So quasars are born at high speed and with low redshift. This is Arp's diagram. You see the parent galaxy in the centre. Where are we? That's this one here. And the high redshift quasars, and the redshift decreases as they move away. Initially their velocity is very high. They are faint, highly redshifted, and travelling at a fair fraction of the speed of light. Over time they gain in mass. This is interesting. It means that energy is being supplied to the matter in the quasar, and the mass is increasing, so that eventually they can actually become a turnaround here and become a companion galaxy. This is an example of another path that they can take, where you end up with another BL-LAC object, as it's called, producing multiple galaxies here. So there is a genealogy, if you like, of galaxies. The idea that the Andromeda galaxy is going to crash into our galaxy in the future is rubbish. It's based on the idea that Andromeda's blue shift with respect to us means that it's approaching us. No, it just means that it's older than us. So the electric universe explains this. Quasars are born at high speed and with low mass. They escape the forces of the electromagnetic galactic nucleus, that's the parent galaxy, as neutrons. And because the neutrons have no charge, they can escape the intense electromagnetic forces that hold that plasmoid in the centre of the galaxy. They have enough time to get away from those powerful forces, and then they decompose into electrons and protons, which are the forerunners of hydrogen. So as the electrical energy pours into the quasar, its mass and brightness increases, and it slows down to become a companion galaxy. So this was an explanation, the only explanation for Halton Arp's observations. Quasars are not the brightest and most distant objects in the universe. They are among the youngest and closest, so the objects in the mirror really are closer than they appear. The visible universe is smaller than we have been told. So the universe, the real universe, is in balance. It is not expanding. This is important for our understanding of gravity. Gravity cannot be simply an attractive force. The universe is of unknown age and extent. The origin of the universe is unknown. There is a universal now, and space has 3 physical dimensions. This brings everything back down to, as Tom was pointing out, conditions as we experience it on Earth. Dark matter galaxies. Galaxies are treated as isolated objects in space, produced somehow by attractive gravity in an expanding universe. Their rotation and structure remains a mystery. They're made of 80% invisible dark matter. Well, Tom gave a good introduction to that story about dark matter. Dark matter has been described as an invisible elephant in the room. You know it's there by the dent it makes in the floorboards. Dark matter is only inferred theoretically by using our experience of gravity on Earth and projecting it onto the rest of the universe. Once again, it's this geocentric problem. We look at the gravity on Earth and then we just extrapolate outwards, because that's all mathematicians can do. It needs an impossible gravitational black hole in the centre. Black holes exist theoretically in asymptotically flat space in an empty universe. You cannot superimpose any other matter in such a hypothetical universe. Black holes don't exist. Yet some sport long, thin, high-velocity jets over intergalactic distances. There is no satisfactory theoretical explanation for these jets. This is the standard, taking the standard approach. Electric galaxies, on the other hand, plasma cosmology shows experimentally and observationally that galaxies are governed by electromagnetic forces. Tony Peratt said that they introduced gravity into their supercomputer runs and it made no difference whatsoever. Spirals rotate as simple Faraday motors. That's why that curve is flat. It's as if you've got a plate and you're just spinning the plate. Stars are born in and trace the spiral power lines. Where there is a higher density of gas and dust, it's typical of an electrical discharge. With the density of the material becomes greater, the discharge becomes more filamentary. Stars form along those pinched current filaments. There are no black holes. It's a compact high-energy plasmoid, and this comes down to peer-reviewed plasma cosmology. Their apparent mass is due to the relationship between mass and energy. If E equals mc squared, if you've got a high concentration of energy in that tiny plasmoid, it will exhibit a considerable mass. It's certainly not a black hole. The other thing is that galaxies line up axially, showing their electrical connectedness because they're threaded like Catherine wheels on a wire. And that wire is one of these intergalactic Birkeland current filaments. So let's look at stars. We've done galaxies, let's look at stars. Arthur Eddington had the temerity to say, it should not be too difficult to understand something as simple as a star. This is typical left hemisphere. His quote is typical: isolate, simplify and ignore a global view. Because if you look at coronas, sunspots, flares, magnetic cyclones, etc., his gas model doesn't predict any of them. And the alternatives are not explored. He dismisses electrical aspects in a few paragraphs. The failure of this approach is shown by continual complications with each new discovery. It's treated as an isolated, gravitating ball of gas. Conventionally, it's a body that satisfies three conditions. It's made of hydrogen plus a few impurities. Having a core of the lightest element is the most fanciful assumption. It's needed to allow the thermonuclear energy model to be viable. That also requires hypothetical extreme conditions in the core. It's only required by the thermonuclear theory and is completely untestable. It also has, that's unverifiable, and also the sequence of nuclear reactions that take place in the core cannot be verified. They're very complex and requires quantum tunneling, which I referred to earlier. And what's more, there's a more complex, different story for different stars. It's certainly not simple. It's an explosive model because one of the reactions is sensitive to the temperature to the fifth power. It also needs an unknown radiation zone to break down the X-rays from the nuclear core. There's no body known that has a radiation or the energy transferred through the body through a radiation zone, so this is hypothetical. And also, from the point of view of life on Earth and so on, it has a restrictive and variable Goldilocks zones distant from the star. It's not the best place to nurture life in the universe. Impossible stars. Formation by gravitational accretion doesn't work. It's never been explained satisfactorily. It has hydrogen, the lightest element in the core. The model doesn't predict the observed features or behaviour. It has different models for white dwarfs, neutron stars, etc. And the life story of stars is super complicated and untestable. And some stars do strange things. They switch from one place to another without going through the transition stages. Renowned scientists like Eddington, who made grave mistakes about the sun and Einstein's general relativity, he went out explicitly to prove Einstein correct, not to test his theory, continue to haunt us today. It gives the lie to the belief that science is self-correcting. It is. It is not, given the way in which science is done today. As Eddington said, if there's no other way out, we may have to suppose that bright line spectra in the stars are produced by electric discharges. The clues were there, but what if was not followed through. Herschel reveals a ribbon of future stars. This was reported on March the 30th this year. So this is a very recent picture. Stars and planets are formed by powerful electromagnetic forces like pearls on a cosmic string. This is a quote from an earlier report. Gravity can be ignored. Plasma cosmology. There is no gravitational accretion. There's no way you can form a string like that using gravity. Gravity is a central force, and the material tends to come into a centre. It doesn't form a string. But this recent report says, and this is important, stars are shot out of the filaments by a slingshot mechanism. And there's a diagram here which shows the filaments moving around like those in the plasma ball, where they snake about. The stars, having been formed in this filament, are left behind as the filament moves on, and these stars are shot out. And it's interesting because Tony Peratt described to us once the effect seen in high-energy discharge experiments as these plasmoids scattered like buckshot. Now, it's not only stars that are formed here, it's all solid bodies, including planets. And they may be captured by the stars to form the weird assortment, over 3,500 of them so far, of exoplanetary systems that have been observed. New stars also may fission to produce hot Jupiters in very close orbits and achieve electrical stability with their changing electrical environment. The movement of the filaments, as I said, is like those in a plasma ball. Heavy elements convect into a cool core. This is interesting because those blue filaments you saw before are the coldest part of the cloud, and this is where the stars are forming. The traditional view is that the stars had to form by gravitational collapse and not lose any of the heat of the collapse, otherwise they couldn't start their nuclear fires. Well, this doesn't require any of that. It was one of the surprises for theorists is that the blue filament I mentioned is the coldest part of the cloud and contains 800 times as much mass as the sun. This is not a surprise for plasma cosmologists. So, all stars have a cool planetary core. Stars and many planets are born together along the same electrical umbilical cord. Other planets and moons are born later in electrical fissioning events and capture events. Hydrogen and helium tend to form the outermost atmosphere. This is a diagram showing the actual form of the filaments. You'll notice the pattern there. This is showing an experimental pattern of a discharge on an insulating plate. And this shows a Martian electrical scar. You can see the similarities. As the cosmic lightning bolt fades, stars and planets are captured into planetary systems. So, electric stars, they remain a gaseous electric discharge phenomena, like spherical searchlights following their birth. In fact, some of the characteristics of the photosphere is like that of a searchlight. All bright stars catalytically produce heavy elements in their photospheric plasma discharges. red stars have gigantic anode sheaths. Sorry, I'll get the right picture there. Plasma discharges adjust to their environment by moving electrical barriers called plasma sheaths, or misleadingly magnetospheres, because they trap the magnetic fields inside. If Jupiter's plasma sheath were lit up, it would appear the size of the full moon in the sky at opposition, and its Galilean moons would be orbiting comfortably inside it. So red dwarfs are not dwarfs, and their bloated glowing anode sheaths are the cosmic wombs for life. Because inside that radiant red sphere, all satellites receive uniform heat and light over their entire surfaces. And it doesn't matter how they're moving or rotating, that will be the case. Of course, this poses a problem for the SETI project because radio waves cannot penetrate the glowing plasma sheath. So if these are the wombs of life, we don't have any way of radio communication with them. But of course, gravity can pass through. White dwarfs are not dwarfs at all, they're just stars with no bright photosphere and a faint white coronal discharge. These are some of the planetary systems that have been discovered. You can see it's quite a shambles. So as I said before, at the galactic scale, electromagnetic forces form these gigantic Birkeland currents and they dominate. At the planetary scale, inside the star's protective plasma sheath, gravity dominates. So you have to choose the region you're talking about when you're trying to apply your model to stars, galaxies and so on. In fact, inside the star's protective sheath, with gravity dominating, and it dominates because it cannot be electrically shielded, so the impact from all of the other stars in the universe is acting like a pressure in on the planets moving around the sun. In fact, this repulsive force from the rest of the universe can reverse the Earth's motion about the sun in 6 months. That is 6 sextillion tons by 140,000 miles an hour. So that gives you an idea of the impact. Then the thunderbolts of the gods operate to modify masses. In planetary systems, the electric force comes into play only when plasma sheaths collide, because then the electrical insulation breaks down and the electric current flows between the two bodies. Then the thunderbolts of the gods operate to modify masses and change orbits and to quickly re-establish order. This is one of the problems that Velikovsky faced. How do you explain events within the memory of mankind of chaos in the solar system, and yet it looks like clockwork today? And this is the answer. You have to apply the electric model of gravity to be able to do this. So Velikovsky was right. Electricity and magnetism are involved in the celestial mechanism. Changing the surface charge on a planet modifies the strength of the internal electric dipole, which is responsible for the planet's mass and gravity. And the changes to both bodies, which I've shown in previous YouTube talks, tends to move the two bodies apart, which is very convenient. This overcomes the objections of the Harvard book burners to Velikovsky's Worlds in Collision. However, it doesn't detract from the title to say that worlds didn't collide. It was an electrical clash of the titans. There's Velikovsky with his great book. So what we have now in science is a mythical journey. It is a rehash of a creation myth. The Earth was born and for 4.5 billion years has remained roughly where it is now. Long ago, the Earth had a few massive impacts to birth the Moon and almost wipe out life on Earth at intervals. Ironically, planetary collisions have been found essential 66 years after Velikovsky's book, Worlds in Collision, was burned. Thousands of exoplanetary systems don't fit the story. There are stars that shouldn't exist, hot Jupiters that orbit their star in hours or days, backward orbits and polar orbits. Life on Earth remains unexplained. The odds against random events producing life are practically infinite. The rest of the story is once upon a time fragmented, boring and non-predictive. We are an isolated and improbable accident. That's why we have difficulty imagining life elsewhere in the universe. Alan Alda complains, everybody is ignorant about science. Alda was 11 years as host of Scientific American Frontiers on PBS, and he helped inspire the creation of the Centre for Communicating Science at Stony Brook in 2009. Is it any wonder, when this is the face of science today, there is no real meaning or morality in modern mechanistic science to engage students or the public. Everyone thinks it is all mathematics. It saddens me to see so much talent wasted in the pursuit of myth, hunting for dark matter. Their heads have been filled with it. Our real journey. Are you looking for the nearest exoplanet? We're standing on it. Pay attention to the oldest stories of the celestial gods who created the skies and land we see today. Yoro Yoro is a research book about the Kimberley region, Aborigines in Western Australia. And some of their stories are so close to the reconstruction of the Saturnian polar configuration that it's almost scary. And these are the words from the elders, and they were very precise in their words. It says, in the beginning, people saw before the Ice Age that the moon, sun, and some of the stars had been on Earth. In other words, they were very close. One song told about a flood long before the last that was brought on by a star with trails. The symbols that testify to these events are still in the Kimberley. The Wandjina creator figure, which is the one you can see on the front of the book there, features are explained. All rings around the head represent clouds and lightning. The big spirit Wandjina have large eyes. This is the eye god motif that Dave Talbot has explained at length. They never have a mouth nor ears, and the line between the eyes indicates where the power flows down, and it's not a nose. And it looks like a hollow tube, which in the plasma column scenario of the Saturnian story is accurate. Walanganda, the creator Wandjina, did not create with his hands, only through his voice with power. It reminds me of in the beginning was the word. Andy Hall has recently explained that the overpressure from supersonic shock waves, that is from the electrical blasts that strike the surface of a body, are powerful enough to form mountains. Rock flows until the overpressure drops, whereupon it solidifies instantly, but retains an imprint of the shock wave. Those shock waves would have produced harmonics and overtones, a global sound like a symphony of giant trumpets. There's many traditions about the creation being associated with sound. This little book I bought in Central Australia on a visit to Uluru, that great red rock, which looks just like an asteroid has landed. And it also tells a story by these people in the Kimberleys, but it's illustrated by children, and it's very quaint. The story is by David Moel Jale, who's the elder. It tells of two suns in the sky who lived in hollow logs, the plasma columns. There is a period of intense heat from them. Then one sun is attacked with a spear, the thunderbolt, and is bitten by a snake, Cometary Venus, who lives in the sky. The little sun gets snagged in the fork of a celestial tree, which is the Axis Mundi, the tree of life, the celestial tree. So this is an extension of the forensic technique that Velikovsky introduced. He never referred to the Australian Aborigines, but some of their memories seem to be so accurate that they are a better source than some of the more so-called advanced cultural reports. All of these story elements make sense to mytho-historians and to the leading plasmacosmologist and colleague of Hans Alfvén, Tony Peratt. Accept best evidence regardless of its fit with modern consensus science and man-made theoretical laws. It is better to adopt a forensic science approach to the evidence for past events that cannot be repeated than to rely on theoretical science which is based on sets of beliefs and a geocentric perspective. Use that evidence to develop a more holistic science that brings our phenomenal real journey to light. To be real and useful, science must be holistic. The electric universe is a holistic science that applies seamlessly from the galactic to the earthly to the biosphere and on down to subatomic particles. Humanity's dramatic experience of the electrical nature of celestial mechanics would make an awe-inspiring and frightening IMAX movie that would make science fiction seem a pale shadow in comparison. But in my opinion, once understood, there will be no irrational urge to revisit doomsday upon each other and the Earth under the unrecognised banners of the prehistoric warring planetary gods. Planets bear the scars of their electrical birth and past encounters on their faces. Apollo astronauts commented on the fresh appearance of lunar craters. The event that caused the great gash across the face of Mars appears in stories from ancient cultures. These are just yesterday in geological time. I recommend you see episode 2, Symbols of an Alien Sky, the lightning-scarred planet Mars. We may understand our history and place in the electric universe for the first time. This is singularly important for our sense of well-being. It gives dramatic new meaning to our lives and a sense of responsibility for our jewel of a planet. Without this sense, we probably have no future on Earth. Also, in the event myth becomes science. There was a unique myth-making period, and all surviving cultures required their stories to be faithfully transmitted for millennia. Such was their importance. We look at these enigmatic rock art figures from the remote Kimberley region in Western Australia and see only their strange, haunting and artistic beauty. And it was rather ironic that just a week or so ago, and David Novak was there to see it too, I think they had the Vivid Festival in Sydney where they project images onto public buildings, and of course the Opera House is the most public building in Sydney. And this was a presentation of Wandjina figures. I mean, they are haunting, and I think they probably evoke some kind of a subconscious connection. But how much more would they mean if people really understood their origin? We need to give more credit to the Indigenous people. Now, Evan Camp said one of the unique aspects of the electric universe theory is that it's good storytelling. It answers all three questions. What if? What if the sky was different in the past? What if Saturn was worshipped as the sun? What if there were electrical discharges between planets? Let's catch up here. What if there were electric discharges between planets? Today we have meteorites from Mars. What if Lichtenberg figures explain the scars on Mars and Earth? Show students pictures of cratering on different bodies and ask students to explain them from 2 points of view. The standard model needs different explanations for each. Oops, sorry. That was unexpected. The electric universe, on the other hand, has a single explanation for them all. Then there is the story of the dissidents. If only Birkeland hadn't been ignored, Hans Alfvén had been listened to, Halton Arp's research hadn't been dismissed. A Pixar rule for storytelling, number 16, what are the stakes? Give us reasons to support the character. What happens if they don't succeed? Stack the odds against them. What of the future if this goes on? We continue wasting money and careers looking for things that don't exist. We cripple students by not training them to think. We may have no future on this planet. As Evan Camp says, The power of eliciting engagement is to get people to come to their own conclusions. Thinking is going to be the future of education. So, our electric universe future. Mahatma Gandhi said, there is a force in the universe which, if we permit it, will flow through us and produce miraculous results. The electric universe is an inspiring story that motivates students both conceptually and artistically, and that is what's needed for left and right brain hemisphere development. Education, classical science and the arts, left and right hemispheres. Let's just catch up here. Many principles of the electric universe were foreseen by scholars in the past, Newton, Faraday, etc. A release from existential fear, Velikovsky's The Bonds of the Past, a documentary. There is a collective inability to face the truth that prehistoric mankind faced doomsday. For millennia, science has preached stability and order, but as amnesiacs, we have a compulsion to instinctively repeat the catastrophes of the past, destroying each other and the earth from the sky with apocalyptic weapons, like the planetary gods of old. This was one of Velikovsky's greatest fears. But we have, on the other hand, the possibility of an unparalleled renaissance with the electric universe, bringing everything together seamlessly. Understanding ourselves and our past can heal the wounds and provide a more universal sense of connection and purpose. Understand the electric force of nature. Power like the sun and gravity. Quantum interactions. All three rely on understanding matter interactions via the instantaneous electric force. Understanding living organisms, the mind-body connection and beyond. Also, understanding the dangers of genetically modified organisms and manufactured food. There is no thought given to the effects, the unintended consequences of fiddling with these things when our basic knowledge is so lacking. And the idea in an electric universe is to live in tune with the earth and each other. Resonant connection. On the most general level, the electric universe is a new paradigm of universal resonant connection. The arbitrary inertial frames of reference of physics are not equivalent when everything is connected in real time. How and where you are makes a difference to your energy state. For example, the GPS system is supposed to prove relativity theory. It doesn't. The atoms in orbiting clocks have a different energy from identical clocks on Earth. So engineers simply count a different number of ticks to compensate. Time is universal, unchanging and unchangeable. Clocks are not. Think of the relationships between all things connected by the universal electric force and consider that the electric force must act instantly, otherwise no information transfer is possible between resonant tuned systems. Spacecraft using slow speed of light transmissions require constant retuning of receivers on Earth to compensate for their motion. Obviously, living systems could not function if moving parts of the body lost contact with the brain. Acknowledging this simple fact will explain quantum weirdness and open up science, particularly biology, to amazing possibilities that are presently forbidden. And understanding gravity and magnetism as balancing electric forces will change forever our view of the heavens and the earth under our feet. As the morphic resonance experiments of the biologist Rupert Sheldrake have shown, the things that are learnt by one organism are immediately available to others like them anywhere on Earth. The universe learns. Resonance between molecular tuning forks allows instant information transfer, the mind-body connection, and beyond. Life is structured water. This was said to me by Gerald Pollack. The experiments, or his experiments, show the structure of electrically polarized water molecules gives rise to water's amazing properties. It allows information to be stored and transferred within a living cell, the memory mechanism of homeopathy. It suggests that the electrically polarizable ether particles may also participate in information storage as well as transmission. The electric universe resonant electrical model of matter and the all-pervasive neutrino ether suggests that resonance and structure within structure can store unlimited information and transfer it instantly. There is more to life than meets the eye. We have always known that instinctively. The electric universe suggests that the information needed for life, forget the gene, that's just the factory floor, is universal, so life can take hold wherever conditions arise that allow it. We see evidence for that in the great changes immediately following catastrophic mass extinctions on Earth. We see it in organisms living in anoxic conditions over volcanic vents on the ocean floor and at great depths in rocks. Just as gravity cannot be shielded, since all matter participates in force transfer, so it is with this universal information bank. There are no islands in space. We are earthlings in the complete resonant connection sense in a meaningful electrical universe. The fact that we exist suggests a purposeful universe. Our lives have purpose. We don't manifest as a blank slate. So children should be observed and supported in their individual passions, not suppressed and moulded to our desires for them. We are born with a purpose, but many need help to discover that purpose. In answering the question, why are we so unhappy, Ian McGilchrist says, true happiness is based on connections with others and a sense of purpose beyond the immediate. True happiness is one aim of this conference. The new panorama of an amazing shared history and kinship must change the world. In the search for meaning, the electric universe paradigm can, as Ian McGilchrist says, change the world. Elegance, harmony, and simplicity of concepts are the electric universe guiding principles. Thank you.
You are now entering an altered zone.
Chapter 8, a 52-year period. The works of Fernando de Alva, Ixtlahuatl, Mexican scholar, circa 1658 to 1648, who was able to read Old Mexican.
You are now entering an altered zone.
Chapter 8, a 52-year period. The works of Fernando de Alva, Ixtlahuatl, Mexican scholar, circa 1658 to 1648, who was able to read Old Mexican texts, preserve the ancient tradition according to which the multiple of 52-year periods played an important role in the recurrence of world catastrophes. He asserts also that only 52 years elapsed between two great catastrophes. As I have already pointed out, the Israelite tradition counts 40 years of wandering in the desert between the time when the Israelites left the desert and started the difficult task of the conquest and the time of the battle at Beth Horon. 12 years may well have passed. The conquest of Canaan took 14 years. and the entire duration of Joshua's leadership amounted to 28 years. Now there exists a remarkable fact. The natives of pre-Columbian Mexico expected a new catastrophe at the end of every period of 52 years, and congregated to await the event. When the night of this ceremony arrived, all the people were seized with fear and waited in anxiety for what might take place. They were afraid that it would be the end of the human race, and the darkness of the night may become permanent. The sun may not rise anymore. They watched for the appearance of the planet Venus. And when, on the feared day, no catastrophe occurred, the people of Maya rejoiced. They brought human sacrifices and offered the hearts of prisoners whose chests they opened with knives of flint. On that night, when the 52-year period ended, a new period of grace had been granted and a new Venus cycle started. The period of 52 years, regarded by the ancient Mexicans as the interval between two world catastrophes, was definitely related by them to the planet Venus. And this period of Venus was observed by both the Mayas and Aztecs. The old Mexican custom of sacrificing to the morning star survived in human sacrifices by the Skitty Pawnee of Nebraska. In years when the morning star appeared especially bright, or in years when there was a comet in the sky. What had Venus to do with the catastrophes that brought the world to the brink of destruction? Here is a question that will carry us very far indeed. Jubilee. I shall postpone only a little giving the answer to the question just posed. First, I should like to find an explanation for the institution of the Jubilee year of the Israelites. Every seventh year, according to the law, was a sabbatical year, during which the land had to be left fallow, and Jewish slaves set free. The 15th year was a Jubilee year, when the land not only had to be left fallow, but had to be returned to its original proprietors. According to the law, one could not convey his land forever. The deed of the sale was but a lease for whatever number of years remained until the Jubilee year. The year was proclaimed by the blowing of horns on the Day of Atonement. In the Day of Atonement shall ye make the trumpet sound throughout all your land, and ye shall hallow the 15th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land, unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you, and ye shall return every man unto his possession, and ye shall return every man unto his family. Ever since exegetes have labored over the biblical statement that the Jubilee year was to be observed every 50th year. The seventh sabbatical year is the 49th year, and the space of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be unto thee 49 years, and ye shall hallow the 50th year. To leave the land fallow for 2 consecutive years was too great a demand, and cannot be explained by the need of the soil under cultivation for rest. The festival of the Jubilee, with the return of the land to its original owners, and the release of slaves, bears the character of an atonement, and its proclamation on the Day of Atonement emphasizes this still further. Was there any special reason why fear returned every 50 years? The Jubilee of the Mayas must have had a genesis, similar to that of the Jubilee of the Israelites. The difference lies in the human character of the festival of the Jews and its inhuman character among the Mayas. But with both peoples, it was a year of atonement, repeating itself every 50th year in the one case and every 52nd year in the other. Comets do not return at exact periods because of perturbations caused by larger planets. The Mayas expected the return of a catastrophe every 52nd year because that was the interval between 2 cataclysms that had taken place. It may be that the comet was actually seen again at such intervals. The Jews fasted and prepared themselves for the day of judgment on the earliest possible date of its return. The Mayas had their festival when the dreaded time had passed without harm. On the Day of Atonement, the Israelites used to send a scapegoat to Azazel in the desert. It was a ceremony of propitiation of Satan. In Egypt, the goat was an animal dedicated to Seth Typhon. Azazel was a fallen star or Lucifer. It was also called Azael. Hello, this is Greg. Aza or Uzzah. According to the rabbinical legend, Uzzah was the star angel of Egypt. It was thrown into the Red Sea when the Israelites made their passage. The Arab name for the planet Venus is El Uzzah. Arabs used to bring human sacrifices to El Uzzah. Muhammad, too, in his early days, worshipped it, and even today the Arabs seek its help. On the day in which the Jubilee year was proclaimed, the Israelites dispatched a placating offer of a scapegoat to Lucifer. But what had Venus to do with the Jubilee and the Atonement? Birth of Venus. The planet turns and revolves on a quiet circular orbit around a greater body, the Sun. It makes contact with another body, comet, that travels on a stretched out ellipse. The planet slips from its axis, runs in disorder off its orbit, wanders rather erratically, and in the end is freed from the embrace of the comet. The body on the long ellipse experiences similar disturbances drawn off its path. It glides to some new orbit. Its long train of gaseous substances and stones is torn away by the Sun or by the planet, or runs away and revolves as a smaller comet along its own ellipse. A part of the tail is retained by the parent comet on its new orbit. Ancient Mexican records give the order of the occurrences. The Sun was attacked by Quetzalcoatl. After the disappearance of this serpent-shaped heavenly body, the Sun refused to shine, and during 4 days the world was deprived of its light. A great many people died at that time. Thereafter, the snake-like body transformed itself into the great star. The star retained the name of Quetzalcoatl. This great and brilliant star appeared for the first time in the east. Quetzalcoatl is the well-known name of the planet Venus. Thus, we read that the Sun refused to show itself, and during 4 days the world was deprived of light. Then a great star appeared. It was given the name Quetzalcoatl, the sky. To show its anger, caused to perish a great number of people who died of famine and pestilence. The sequence of seasons and the duration of days and the nights became disarranged. It was then that the people of Mexico regulated anew the reckoning of days, nights, and hours, according to the difference in time. It is a remarkable thing, moreover, that time is measured from the moment of its morning star's appearance. Tilezankalpantecutli, or the morning star, appeared for the first time, following the convulsions of the earth overwhelmed by a deluge. It looked like a monstrous serpent. This serpent is adorned with feathers. That is why it is called Quetzalcoatl, Cucamonz, or Kukulkan, just as the world is about to emerge from the chaos of the great catastrophe. It is seen to appear. The feather arrangement of Quetzalcoatl represented flames of fire. Again, the old texts speak of the change that took place at the moment of the great catastrophe of the deluge, in the condition of many constellations, principal among them being precisely Tilezankalpantecutli, or Star of Venus. The cataclysm accompanied by a prolonged darkness appears to have been that of the days of the Exodus, when a tempest of cinders darkened The world disturbed in its rotation. Some of the references may allude to the subsequent catastrophe of the time of the conquest by Joshua, when the sun remained for more than a day in the sky of the old world. Since it was the same comet that on both occasions made contact with the Earth, and at each of the contacts the comet changed its own orbit. The relevant question is not on which occasion did the comet change its orbit, but first of all, which comet changed to a planet, or which planet was a comet in historical times. The transformation of the comet into a planet began on contact with the Earth in the middle of the second millennium before the present era, and was carried a step further, one Jubilee period later. After the dramatic events of the time of Exodus, the Earth was shrouded in dense clouds for decades. An observation of stars was not possible. After the second contact, Venus, the new and splendid member of the solar system family, was seen moving along its orbit. It was in the days of Joshua, a time designation meaningful to the reader of the sixth book of the scriptures, but for the ancients it was the time of Agog. I'm pretty sure that means giants. As I explained above, he was the king by whose name the cataclysm, the deluge of Ogyges, was known, and who, according to the Greek tradition, laid foundations of Thebes in Egypt. In The City of God by Augustine, it is written, from the book of Marcus Varro, entitled Of the Race of the Roman People, I cite word for word the following instance. Their occurrence a remarkable celestial portent, star Venus, called Vesperagu by Palladius, and the lovely Hesperus by Homer. There occurred so strange a prodigy that it changed its color, size, form, course, which never happened before nor since. Adrastus of Cyzicus and Dion of Naples, famous mathematicians, said that this occurred in the reign of Ogyges. The fathers of the church considered Ogyges a contemporary of Moses. Agog, mentioned in the blessing of Balaam, was the king Ogyges. The upheaval that took place in the days of Joshua and Agog, the deluge that occurred in the days of Ogyges, the metamorphosis of Venus in the days of Ogyges, the star Venus which appeared in the sky of Mexico after a protracted night, and a great catastrophe. All these are related. Augustine went on to make a curious comment on the transformation of Venus. Certainly that phenomenon disturbed the canons of the astronomers, so as to take upon them to affirm this which happened to the morning star, Venus, never happened before nor since. But we read in the divine books that even the sun itself stood still when a holy man, Joshua, the son of Nun, had begged this from God. Augustine had no inkling that Castor, as quoted by Varro, and the book of Joshua, as quoted in the book of Joshua, refer to the same occurrence. Are Hebrew sources silent on the birth of a new star in the days of Joshua? They are not. It is written on whatever it is they write it on in the Samaritan Chronicle that during the invasion of Palestine by the Israelites under Joshua, a new star was born in the east. A star arose out of the east, against which all magic is vain. Chinese chronicles record that a brilliant star appeared in the days of Yahoo. blazing star. Plato, citing the Egyptian priest, said that the world's conflagration associated with Python was caused by a shifting of bodies in the sky which move around the Earth. As we have seen reason to assume that it was the comet Venus that, after two contacts with the Earth, eventually became a planet. We shall do well to inquire, did Phaethon turn into the morning star? Phaethon, which means the blazing star, became the morning star. The earliest writer who refers to the transformation of Phaethon into a planet is Hesiod. This transformation is related by Hyginus in his Astronomy, where he tells how Phaethon, that caused the conflagration of the world, was struck by a thunderbolt of Jupiter and was placed by the sun among the stars, planets. It was the general belief that Phaethon changed into the morning star. On the island of Crete, Atimnios was the name of the unlucky driver of the sun's chariot. He was worshipped as the evening star, which is the same as the morning star. The birth of the morning star, or transformation of a legendary person, Ishtar, Phaethon, Quetzalcoatl, into the morning star was widespread motif in the folklore of the Oriental and Occidental peoples. The Tahitian tradition of the birth of the morning star is narrated on the Society Island in the Pacific. The Mangian legend says that with the birth of a new star, the Earth was battered by countless fragments. The Bharats, Kyrgyz, and Yucats of Siberia, and the Eskimos of North America also tell of the birth of the planet Venus. A blazing star disrupted the visible movement of the sun, caused a world conflagration, and became the morning-evening star. This may be found not only in the legends and traditions, but also in astronomical books of the ancient peoples of both hemispheres. Four-planet system. By asserting that the planet Venus was born in the first half of the second millennium, I assume also that the third millennium only 4 planets could have been seen, and that in astronomical charts of this early period the planet Venus cannot be found. In an ancient Hindu table of planets attributed to the year -3102, Venus, alone among the visible planets, is absent. The Brahmins of the early period did not know the 5-planet system, and only in later middle period did the Brahmins speak of 5 planets. Babylonian astronomy, too, had a 4-planet system. In ancient prayer, planets Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Mercury are invoked. The planet Venus is missing, and one speaks of 4-planet system of the ancient astronomers of Babylonia. These 4-planet systems and the inability of the ancient Hindus and Babylonians to see Venus in the sky, even though it is more conspicuous than the other planets, are puzzling unless Venus was not among the planets. On a later date, the planet Venus receives the appellative, the great star that joins the great stars. The great stars are, of course, the 4 planets, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, and Venus joins them as the 5th planet. Apollonius Rhodius refers to a time when not all the orbs were yet in the heavens. One of the planets is a comet. Democritus, circa negative 460 to circa negative 37, a contemporary of Plato and one of the great scholars of antiquity, is accused by the moderns of not having understood the planetary character of Venus. Plutarch quotes him as speaking of Venus as if it were not one of the planet phenomena. But apparently the author of these treatises on geometry, optics, and astronomy, no longer extant, knew more about Venus than his critics think. From quotations which have survived in other authors, we know that Democritus built a theory of the creation and destruction of worlds which sounds a lot like modern planetesimal theory, without its shortcomings. He wrote, "The worlds are unequally distributed in space. Here there are more, there fewer, some waxing, some are in their prime, some waning, coming into being in one part of the universe, ceasing in another part. The cause of their perishing is collision with one another." He knew that the planets are at unequal distances from us, and that there are more planets than we are able to discover with our eyes. Aristotle quoted the opinion of Democritus, "Stars have been seen when comets dissolve." Among the early Greek scholars, Pythagoras, of the 6th century, is generally credited with having had access to some secret science. His pupils and their pupils, the so-called Pythagoreans, were cautious not to disclose their science to anyone who did not belong to their circle. Aristotle wrote of their interpretation of the nature of comets. Some of the Italians called Pythagoreans say that the comet is one of the planets, but it appears at great intervals of time and only rises a little above the horizon. This is the case with Mercury, too. Because it only rises a little above the horizon, it often fails to be seen and consequently appears at great intervals of time. This is a confused presentation of a theory, but it is possible to trace the truth in the Pythagorean teaching, which was not understood by Aristotle. A comet is a planet which returns at long intervals. That's one way of looking at it, isn't it? Never looked at it that way. One of the planets which rises only a little above the horizon was still regarded by the Pythagoreans of the 4th century as a comet. With the knowledge obtained from other sources, it is easy to guess that by one of the planets is meant Venus. Only Mercury and Venus rise a little above the horizon. Aristotle disagreed with the Pythagorean scholars who considered one of the 5 planets to be a comet. These views involve impossibilities. You know, it's funny, Aristotle was like the ancient Einstein, the guy who was wrong and everybody has to follow. These views involve impossibilities. This is the case, first, with those who say the comet is one of the planets. More comets than one have often appeared simultaneously. As a matter of fact, no planet has been observed besides the 5. All of them are often visible above the horizon together at the same time. Further, comets are often found to appear as well when all planets are visible as when some are not. With these words, Aristotle, who did not learn the secrets of the Pythagoreans directly, tried to refute their teaching by arguing that all 5 planets are in their places when a comet appears, as if the Pythagoreans thought that all comets were one and the same planet leaving its usual path at certain times. But the Pythagoreans did not think that one planet represents all comets. According to Plutarch, they taught that each of the comets has its own orbit and period of revolution. Hence, the Pythagoreans apparently knew that the comet, which is one of the planets, is Venus. mystery in the comet Venus. During the centuries when Venus was a comet, it had a tail. The early traditions of peoples of Mexico, written down in pre-Columbian days, relate that Venus smoked, the star that smoked. La Estrella Q Humeva was Sitley-Caloha, which the Spaniards call Venus. Now I ask, says Alexander Humboldt, what optical illusion could give Venus the appearance of a star throwing out smoke? Sahagan, the 16th century Spanish authority on Mexico, wrote that the Mexicans called a comet a star that smoked. It may thus be concluded that since the Mexicans called Venus a star that smoked, they considered it a comet. It is also said in the Vedas that the star Venus looks like fire with smoke. Apparently the star had a tail, dark in the daytime and luminous at night. In very concrete form, this luminous tail, which Venus had in earlier centuries, is mentioned in the Talmud, in the tractate Shabbat. Fire is hanging down from the planet Venus. This phenomenon was described by the Chaldeans. The planet Venus was said to have a beard. This technical expression, beard, is used in modern astronomy in the description of comets. These parallels in observations made in the valley of the Ganges, on the shores of the Euphrates, and on the coast of the Mexican Gulf prove their objectivity. The question must then be put, not in the form, what was the illusion of the ancient Toltecs and Mayas, but what was the phenomenon and what was its cause? A train large enough to be visible from Earth and giving the impression of smoke and fire hung from the planet Venus. Venus, with its glowing train, was a very brilliant body. It is therefore not strange that the Chaldeans described it as a bright torch of heaven, also as a diamond that illuminates like the sun, and compared its light with the light of the rising sun. You know, it's still luminous, even to this day, when you look at it through a telescope. At present, the light of Venus is less than 1/1,000,000th of the light of the sun, a stupendous prodigy in the sky. The Chaldeans called it. The Hebrews similarly described the planet. The brilliant light of Venus blazes from one end of the cosmos to the other end. The Chinese astronomical text from Su Chao refers to the past when Venus was visible in full daylight and, while moving across the sky, rivaled the sun in brightness. As late as the 7th century, Assur-banipal wrote that Venus, Ishtar, who is clothed with fire and bears aloft a crown of awful splendor. The Egyptians, under Sethethus, described Venus, Sekhmet, a circling star which scatters its flame in fire, a flame of fire in her tempest, possessing a tail and moving on a not yet circular orbit. Venus was more of a comet than a planet, and was called a smoking star, or a comet by the Mexicans. They also called it by the name Tizan Makui, or the Mane. The Arabs called Ishtar Venus by the name Thabash, or one with hair, as did the Babylonians.
Sometimes there are hairs attached to the planets, wrote Pliny. An old description of Venus must have served as a basis for his assertion. But hair, or coma, is a characteristic of comets. And in fact, comet is derived from the Greek word for hair. The Peruvian name, Chasca, wavy-haired, is still the name for Venus. Though at present the morning star is definitely a planet and has no tail attached to it. But that is not so. NASA discovered stringy things, reaching all the way to the tip of Earth's atmosphere. So it does still tickle Earth and possess a tail. The coma of Venus changed its form with the position of the planet. When the planet Venus approaches the Earth now, it is only partly illuminated, a portion of the disk being in shadow.
It's really weird when you look at it through a telescope. It's weird. Being in shadow, it has phases like the moon. At this time, being closer to the Earth, it is most brilliant. When Venus had a coma, the horns of its crescent must have been extended by illuminated portion of the coma. It thus had two long appendages and looked like a bull's head. Sanchoniathon says that Astarte, Venus, had a bull's head. The planet was even called Astaroth Carneum, or Astarte of the Horns, a name given to a city in Canaan in honor of this deity. The golden calf worshipped by Aaron and the people at the foot of Sinai was the image of a star. Rabbinical authorities say that the devotion of Israel to this worship on the bull is in part explained by the circumstance that while passing through the Red Sea, they beheld the celestial throne. And most distinctly, of the four creatures about the throne, they saw the ox. The likeness of a calf was placed by Jeroboam in Dan, the great temple of the northern kingdom, Tristria of the Zendavesta, the star that attacks the planets. The bright and glorious Tistria mingles his shape with light moving in the shape of a golden horned bull. The Egyptians similarly pictured the planet and worshipped it in the effigy of a bull. The cult of a bull sprang up also in Mycenaean Greece. A golden cow head with a star on its brow was found in Mycenae on the Greek mainland. The people of a faraway Samoa, primitive tribes that depend on oral tradition as they have no art of writing, repeat to this day. The planet Venus became wild and horns grew out of her head. Examples and references could be multiplied ad libitum. The astronomical texts of the Babylonians describe the horns of the planet Venus. Sometimes one of the two horns became more prominent. Because astronomical works of antiquity have so much to say about the horns of Venus, modern scholars have asked themselves whether the Babylonians could have seen the phases of Venus, which cannot now be distinguished with the naked eye. Galileo saw them for the first time in modern history, and he used his telescope. The long horns of Venus could have been seen without the aid of a telescopic lens. The horns were illuminated portions of the coma of Venus, which stretched out toward the Earth. These horns could also have extended toward the Sun as Venus approached the solar orb. On the left, since comets were repeatedly observed with projections in the direction of the Sun around a twig, while the tails of the comets are regularly directed away from the Sun, when Venus approached close to one,
Good night. Thank you for watching.